And he's a real one, huh? Right?
Yeah.
That's right. You guys walked into the live in the middle of this healthy dialogue between this absolute legend and myself. This is episode 232 of the Option Podcast. I'm Jason DeBeas. That looks like Ruth Nelson. We're gonna find out. Buckle up, people. The episode starts right now. Hey guys, this is what happens when you take your own show. You get it half right, but you know what? 50% me is still 100% better than 100% most. And guess what? We just upped the ante. We just upped the stake because on my left or on my right, depending on where you're looking on your TV screen, is a legendary, incomparable college coach, club coach, professional coach, USA coach, Ruth Nelson. What's good?
Wow. I never coached club. I trained a team that played club
Right.
because I didn't want to coach because I didn't want to have to deal with the parents.
Yeah,
That was in 2000.
yesterday, two days ago, we said like the volleyball and the politics that mix in together.
Huh.
The safest place you feel is like on the sideline coaching, right?
Or with
And
the
then when the game,
5-year-olds.
and then like when the game's over, you're like, okay, now I got to deal with this, now I got to deal with that, now I got to deal with this. But like the places we feel, and I speak for many coaches when I say this, where we feel in heaven is just on that sideline and just watching the girls or the gals or boys doing their thing and making mistakes, making great plays, having a good time, right?
Oh, but I feel safe when I'm doing ages 5 through 8. So I can't say that. But I haven't been coaching them,
Yeah.
just training them. You're safe when you're training.
So, yeah. It is. Well, it depends on the coach, right? There are some coaches where the club has a policy where parents are not allowed, right?
Right.
And maybe that's good for the programs, and maybe more programs should do that or not. I don't know. I don't care. My
Right.
own personal policy, which a lot of the clubs that I've coached with have been lenient with me. They're like to your own peril, Jason. While I'm like, parents should come 24/7. First one
Yeah.
there, last one's to leave. They're more than invited, and all of the program directors say, we like you, and we'll let you do what you want a little bit. We took a blood oath about
Sure.
this volleyball thing. Keep it about
Uh-huh.
volleyball. Um, but okay, yeah, you can do that,
Yeah.
but you've been warned, and yeah, I think it just comes from being comfortable in your own skin,
Yeah.
and some of the parents are truly invested.
Well, you know what? When you think about it, what parents, even starting in 2000, when I was doing private lessons, I never did a private lesson without a parent there because number one is I want the parent shagging balls. I want the kid to touch more balls. And the parent's making an investment, and that kid needs to understand that that investment is allowing you to have some extra training. And if that extra training isn't making you and giving you opportunities for more playing time, then either one, you're not doing what you've been practicing with me, or you are doing it and maybe it's not your time to get on the court. But when you get on the court, you better be able to perform.
Right, absolutely. And hey, let's do a little brief. You were on the podcast before.
Yeah.
Give us a brief synopsis of what be, and we're definitely going to talk about the Hall of Fame and then this most recent award they've bestowed upon you.
Okay.
BYOP. BYOP stands for what?
Bring your own parent, not bring your own photographer. Oh, yeah. You better cough on that one. I had one parent say she was going to sue me. And I said, look, yeah, this isn't bring your own photographer. This is that's exactly because they go, oh, every youth sport thing I've ever done, I've been able to take pictures. I said, yes, but not every sport allows you to be on the court while your athlete is learning, and they should be the person learning, not you. So if Sarah is having trouble with her mom because her mom isn't passing, I'll say, Sarah, hey, I think your mom could use a little bit of assistance because I know how much you really do a great job in tossing. So could you take a couple of few minutes and everybody go to your parents and show them a little bit more about tossing and how you follow through? Okay, that first time, probably the first two times, it's hard for parents to be quiet.
Yeah, I was actually going to explore some of the advantages of BYOP and as well as some of the
Oh,
challenges. That was definitely going to be one of our conversations, but we wanted to set up have a set of given circumstances where people knew we were coming from. BYOP people is bring your own parents, where parents serve as assistant coaches, ball shaggers, whatever. If you actually chart things in practice, perhaps the parents do that too. And I don't mean to speak for you, but like I just wanted to make sure, like, because there was great feedback and viewership from the last time you came,
uh-huh.
and everyone
Well,
everyone shared a joke when you were like, "What took so long?" or something like
hey,
that.
Jason, though, think of this. But in this, it's like parents very rarely now get an hour time with their kid once a week. So originally, when I started this in 2013,
Mm,
my whole idea was how can I create a situation in which the player feels at ages 10 and under to be in charge of what they're doing. However, to have their parents be engaged, but be on the court and not telling them what to do nor coaching. So all they're doing is giving feedback on keywords, wrist, thumbs, hands, for passing. And one parent said, Ruth, isn't there something else I can say? I said, how about encouraging them? You don't have to tell them more than that, because that's really what it is. Because think of this, at 5 years old, they're having a tough time skipping, shuffling, jumping rope. And you don't need to do a whole lot of things, but there are some things that we have parents step in and, help them with swinging and jump roping, because that's a coordinated thing. But it is about the kid. It's about the kid being in control. All the kids get a chance to rotate around, and they have all the different parents are now giving them key words. And I'm finding that it's gotten better and better. I just did one in Nebraska, and the person that runs a new 12 court facility there, she said, Ruth, I just want to tell you, my daughter's really shy. And I said, oh, no problem. I'll take care of her. She told me her daughter got home and was telling her little brother how to do all the skills. She explained all the things to her husband. And the next day she got up in the morning. She goes, Mom, can I wear my BYOP shirt to school? A shy kid.
there you
Now
go.
that's pretty powerful, Jason.
It very much is, and I think that comes with you making the subject matter, I guess the practice or why she's there, interesting, right? And
Uh-huh.
and the best way to get rid of the shy element in kids is to make it about something else. Like
Yeah.
I see a 3-year-old, right, and the parents want to introduce her and they run behind mom. And I will just ask a question like, how old are you, right? And they won't listen, but I'll start putting out 3 fingers. I'm like, I think I'm, right, and then, now they're
Uh-huh.
looking, now they're peeking, right? I think you're 3,
Yeah.
right? And then when
No.
I say I think you're 3, I run behind my wife. I run behind her and just hide, right? And now the kid's just like, and there are certain things that we as coaches, there's seminars you can go to, and there's a whole bunch of scientific studies that show how to deal with
Right. Right.
shy kids, but and I always have a bias against it because I always accuse them of devaluing experience,
Uh-huh.
devaluing who I think in many cases the real scientists are. We're the ones that are doing journals every night. You've done it longer than
Uh-huh.
have people have lived. There's
Yeah.
not a study in the world that's gonna replace that.
Well,
you know.
I can tell you this, that a lot of people have tried to get me to do my BYOP certification for instructors, to do it online. And I said, maybe certain parts that you can take my 2 courses that I have with art of coaching, and it's specifically for ages 10 and under.
Right.
That's great to take those, but you can't ever lose, because they spend 20 hours getting certified. You can't take away that 4 hours that you work with the kid, and you're going to teach what you just learned to them and see how they respond, and also to see how I respond, and to also see the kids that I've had with me for 4 years, and now they're 8. They started at 4 and now they're 8, and to see how their skills and fundamentals, and are they doing it anatomically correct? Are they biomechanically sound? Does it make sense? You guys talked the other day on common sense. How do you argue with common sense? Common sense is this: if I can't move, how can I pass the ball?
Yeah. There's that. You're doing like the dance, like the floss.
Yeah,
Right? I forgot that dance. It's just hands
that's
forward, hands backwards.
it doesn't.
I can't do it with a chair. I got floss with a chair, guys.
That's right. You better be careful. Don't get
Yeah.
hurt.
Yeah, I've already gotten hurt, so. But that's definitely getting some of the kids out of their shell
Uh-huh.
is a great element as far as BYOP. You being the expert, I'd love to let you just talk more than me. Maybe give me one or two more advantages, or where you've seen progression that is correlated or direct results of
Okay.
BYOP.
Well,
What
I
are one or
think
two
what
more other advantages?
I would say that one of the most important things, most of the kids that have been in BYOP, but let me just say this, BYOP is recognized more around the world than it is here in the US.
Yeah,
Because everybody in the US, this is typical comment. Oh, Ruth, we're doing what you're doing. Well, how do you do what I'm doing when your background wasn't even in teaching, wasn't in anatomy, wasn't in biomechanics, and you were never a teacher? And a coach is not necessarily a teacher. I consider myself a teacher, but I'm a very good game coach. And so, in my mind, why is it so recognized all over the world and not here? And the fact is, maybe because you got to pay a licensing fee and maybe, but you have your own program. And if you have your own program, nobody else can have that. When I trademarked my BYOP, I trademarked it for all youth sports. So if it would be beach volleyball, BYOP, it would be pickleball, it would be everything. So the whole idea of what it does is it brings the parent closer to their kid, one, to an activity where the parent isn't the cheerleader, the parent is reinforcing how the player continues to improve and have fun as they're doing it. Not fun and learning, but doing it and having fun. Because I think there's a big difference because everybody thinks fun means playing and even more fun means winning. And I can tell you, most of the kids that train with me have gone into recreation and they come back and this is what they say to me. They go, Coach Ruth, you know what the players keep telling me? Just to pass it over the net. And I tell them they need to pass it up to center front or in the middle of the court. And now my 9-year-old that I've been training, she goes, Ruth, that's out of system. I go, okay, fine. I know it's out of system, but a 5-year-old is not going to care if it's out of system. I said that second person just passes it up in the air and the third person passes it over. 3 people get to touch it. If you're playing tennis and you're playing singles, you're one-on-one, but you're playing a team sport. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is it was developed mainly so that a community, the parents could come home, have something to eat, go to the activity. They had to walk to the gym or go travel to the gym. They're at the gym and then they come home. And at the same time, to let the kid actually talk as they're going and talk when they're coming back. And let them talk, not you telling them what they should have done or why they didn't do it correctly.
absolutely. I like that. What are I think I'd like to also add that parents who are former players or maybe like at the end of their current players volleyball
Uh-huh.
playing lives, a lot of them as their kid gets older sees the lives vicariously through them, right? So that and this is where the advantages also seep into where our conversation can present the challenges, right? Uh,
Yeah.
um, m- as a coach, the people that I got the least feedback from were the highest level players, right? I'll give you an example. Sarah Stratton played in the Olympics
Okay.
in 2000 Australia, right? I
Okay.
coached her son, Zach.
Uh-huh.
She would only have the conversation with me if her and I were like at a coffee shop or if I talked to her about it. She never said, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, you should do that. Brian Ivy, Olympian, right? I coached
Uh-huh.
his
Uh-huh.
nephew, Donovan. And Brian Ivy's brother also played at SC. They
Mhm.
sit there and they're just chilling. And I'm like, hey guys, what's up? And sometimes, you have these Olympic experience guys, and I got a pretty good resume too. But there are levels to that. These guys played at the highest level.
Sure.
I might be fishing for something or advice,
Uh-huh.
but they would never. they would never give it to me unless I came to them first. And it's so weird that a lot of the players at the middle of the pack are always the ones that are asking questions. They think that are coming from an innocent place, but
Right.
the question is shaped in a way that calls for conclusion, right? So
Right.
that I'm not trying to answer the question for you, because your answer is going to be a different experience. But from my experience, that was one of the challenges I've had with parents being at practice. Some of them who play the game are like, well, I'm just saying you should probably do it like this. This guy does it like that. And I'm just like, so that's one of my challenges. What are some of your challenges for BYOP?
Okay, so one is trying to get people to understand you have to make an investment in your own training, and you have to make this investment in the sense that, it's like volleyball from 1970 was mainly a beach support, go to USVBA, it used to be USA Volleyball now. Yep. Go and you play and you party and you do this. And I think that has always kind of, it hasn't separated as much to make it at the level of the professionalism that most people look. And I can say the best people that I have that are my instructors, they're the ones that haven't played at a top level. They're the ones that necessarily haven't played very much at all, parents-wise. And they are eager to learn what things they can do at home with their kids, because they're kind of stuck in knowing enough to help them at home. So when I developed my second program, it's called Home Training Program Series. It has two aspects to it. One is the physical elements of performance, which is hand-eye coordination, jump roping, lift, for floater serve, toss for top spin serve, and then the fundamental skills of volleyball of what things you can do. And these are things that you have charts that you can, everyone thinks, oh, Ruth, that was really smart to develop that during COVID. And I said, no, it was before that. Every week the parent says, what can I do? Because even someone's experience, and I'll say Danielle Scott, she brought her daughter to one of my BYOP events in Dallas. And for those that are listening, she's a five-time Olympian.
Five-time Olympian, guys. Danielle Scott. Yep.
And there's only 6 in the world, right? And one in volleyball. And one of the things that she has always said is, just because I played 5 Olympics doesn't mean I know how to teach everything. So that's almost, that's like an open door to, hey, let me see how there's different ways. And so then I didn't tell anybody in the session, because it was a play day session in skills contest, because I do skills contests after 8 weeks. And at the end, I said, hey, by the way, if any of you would like to take a picture with Danielle Scott, she's a 5-time Olympian. And here it was, all these parents were coaching her daughter, right? They did not even know who she was. But, that in itself, and then let me just jump to this. Doug Beal said to me one time, he says, Ruth, don't you think that kids are going to get burnout if they're starting with you at 3 and 4 years old? And I said, Doug, you've never been to a BYOP session. I said, they're not going to get burnout, because by and large, they have a lot of fun moving, and they are meeting new friends, and they're high-fiving it, and they're talking to parents they don't know. Now, when would somebody normally do that? Like what you said. Now, I can say that there's been kids that will hide, and I'll go, okay, everybody's got to shuffle. Now you got to shuffle with me. And I get that kid shuffling. I shuffle them very quickly to the next parent. All right, now we're ready to go. So they don't even know. They just shuffled to a new parent. They've already high-fived. They gave them a name, and now they're already starting. So for those people that in the BYOP side, if you're not energetic and you're not interested in having a lot of fun, and they're just like brand new sponges, they take in all the information, not like an old sponge, like you get at certain grade levels and they don't want to
squeeze
listen.
It and it doesn't puff back out, right? Yeah.
No, exactly.
Okay. I would also suggest to Doug Beal, with respect to Doug Beal, that burning out is a combination of a lot of things. Burning out is kids getting an overload of information at a short time span. Burning out is maybe getting this information for this long sustained period of time where eventually they just wear out. Burning out is when the coach, unwittingly or not, might set up an atmosphere where the kid might want to come or might not want to come, right? School's done. Are they excited about coming, or school's done? Do they treat it like a homework assignment? I got to go, guys, right? So, and that Doug Beal should know more than anybody. That comes down to the coaches. That comes down to years and years of teaching it. Years and years of. I mean, I'm not gonna. We're not gonna pretend you're perfect, right? It was probably years of making mistakes and correcting them
Oh,
that led to this beautiful thing that has been this time tested thing, which I'm always glad to have you on the podcast and talk about. And I feel weird because Doug Beal. Right, I'm talking about a gold medal winning coach, right? Like
right.
1984, but. And I'm only saying this because it's something he, as a longtime experienced coach, knows and experienced, which is probably why he presented the question, right?
Sure. But
Which
then, okay.
your answer is appropriate. You haven't,
Uh-huh.
you got to
Right.
take a trip
You
there a
haven't seen
couple of
it.
times and then come see me, then maybe ask that question again if it's still a question,
But
right?
you
And we
know
can
what?
answer that together, right?
The answer then is, in my feeling, in my perspective of watching these kids, is the reason why kids, and see, I don't even understand if what burnout, they don't know what burnout is. It's
No.
365, 24/7, doing it for 30 years. It's like a kid at 8 years old says, I said, did you jump rope? And they go, I didn't have time. And I said, give me your schedule. How many hours are you in school? Okay. How many hours did you sleep? Okay. How many hours did you eat? And how many hours did you study? I said, you have 8 hours left. You don't have 3 minutes to jump rope. So don't ever ask me that you don't have time. That's very simple. An 8-year-old kid says that to me. But one of the things I think is, I think they compete too soon.
Right.
Okay, now what I've done is, okay, if you know, and you're a college coach at any level, you know that the top 25% of the kids all over the country, right? 75% need to figure out how they're going to get to college and play, right? So now I'm giving you the theory. If I'm 8 and 9, which I have kids that train with me and they play, my program's $280. Their club program is $4,100. All right. They still come to me. And I say, as a parent, why are you still coming to me? Because we want to learn the skills. And I said, oh, and then you're getting repetitions. Well, I'm adding a 0 to mine from now on, in reality. But I said, what happens is they get and they compete. So that 8 and the 9-year-old, if they're big and strong, they play 12U ball. Okay. Two
There it
weeks
is.
ago,
There's
came on
that
the
ball.
market, a 10U competition ball.
Let's go. All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So think of this. 75% of the kids aren't big and strong. So what are they doing? Like they do in beach. Deep dish.
Yeah,
And then it's like Debbie Green said when she was at Long Beach as an assistant. I said, Debbie, what's the one thing or technique that you will not recruit a kid based on? She goes, if they deep dish. She says it's too hard to change.
yeah, it is hard to change, and it's weird because as a coach, and this is where I examine my flaws too. As a coach, I understood why like some of the younger indoor teams and beach teams do it because you're trying to get kids used to it getting in your triangle and the finish,
Yep.
the up and away, and then they understand what the contact and fluidity looks like. But then, and this is where Chris Hanneman
Yeah.
corrected me. He's like, now that they've learned that though, now you have to teach them setting all over again, right? So it's you're teaching them, but at the same time, it's time wasted in the playing field.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Without
Okay.
sounding judgy about like how people teach their kids how to set. But Hanneman brought it. That was a very good point by a guy who he and his brothers have a long
For
storied history
sure.
of playing in a game.
Okay, think of this, since 2013
Hmm.
until like before, about 2 years before COVID, 2019,
Right.
we're trying to teach a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old to play volleyball. And the first thing they say is, Coach Ruth, it hurts. Okay, now you're going to cut off some high top socks, which I don't think they make them anymore,
No.
but you put them on them, you put long sleeve on them, and it still hurts. So what we did for the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, look at this. This is an oversized ball.
Yeah.
So now I can get them to shuffle and not think about missing the ball, because touching the ball means success, right?
100%.
So I move my feet, and this ball is big enough that I can practice passing. However, my 9 and 10-year-olds love it when they're working on their footwork for hitting, because the worst thing is you work on your footwork for hitting and you miss the ball because you don't know the timing, right? But when you got this, it doesn't hurt and it's big.
No.
So someone always says, why do you decide a smaller ball and a bigger ball? I said, no, it's really three things. It's lighter because it's flex foam and it doesn't hurt. And
Yes.
if the majority of girls, and I'm addressing girls because there's more girls that are playing than guys, more girls have their bows and they're prissy. And if it hurts, we ain't coming back.
Right.
We're not coming back.
No,
So
of course.
for almost 5 years, I had to use the 12U ball. And those guys are now 21, 22, and they're saying, Ruth, why didn't you do that? And I said, it was convincing the value of, and I went to Baden and they go, it's like they said, oh, that crazy Ruth Nelson, she wants to do something different. No, because I'm a teacher. I'm here. I am. I had the privilege of coaching Olympic athletes. I was gifted because, they came to University of Houston and played. But I think of this with little kids. You have one chance and you educate them. And I have a card that they bounce and they learn the positions. They have ace player card where the players got cartoon characters and they learn this is setting, this is blocking. I have them jump and block. And it's not like they're not learning volleyball. And I say this, no matter what level you teach and train, do not train one-dimensional players.
Amen. Amen.
And you know who's just said that? Danny, new coach, Nebraska. She said, if club coaches, can you be sure to train all the skills? Well, you need more people at that level to say that, because what they see now is you've got all the pro teams, right? Well, they're all doing different rules. They're all doing different substitutions.
Of course.
And you cannot have all the same rules. And everybody says, well, in the foreign countries, they use the same rules. Well, you know what? In the foreign countries, they don't have all the recreational leagues we have. They do not have the high school. They do not have the competition junior high. Where do? They have a club system, and it's completely different. So why should we do what they're doing overseas? We should learn
because
from
they're
them.
winning. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Listen, look, if you want to talk about the beat scene, right? You got Norway, right, which has actually an academy where the kids meet their math, science, and academia, and their gym class is just volleyball, right?
Yep.
So people need to take into consideration our last two gold medalists were from countries that don't even have beaches, right? I mean, Sweden is cold as hell, cold as hell all year.
Right.
Like Norway, the Norwegians, Malin Sorum. So, and people are trying to tell me that they have all the facilities, all the advantages, and tons of money. I mean, Houston now is using oil money to try to take over indoor volleyball, right? they're trying to surpass California right now, but it's about quality over quantity. And I wanted to re-explore what you said about not training one-dimensional players. I would suggest to you that we should be able to train kids in a grounded way, like a step one grounded way that allows them to play in these different leagues, right? If someone is a fast release setter, right? And if they're technically correct, it's probably not going to, like if some of these leagues that judge it by spin, it's not going to spin anyway, right? I'm a prisoner of the moment right now, but American players like Chris Austin, two-time NCAA champ, right? Everybody hates Chris. Well, just, and people feel different ways about him, but let's skip past that. And when he played in the qualifier and he made the main draw, he was just a fast release setter, just allowed him to jump set. And if you look at some of the overseas teams, you look at the Swedes right now, there's no deep dish on that, right? And and now because you taught your kids the deep dish,
right,
you basically eliminated their ability to jump set without looking like they're playing taps. We had this game in Brooklyn called taps where your feet had to be in the air when you're holding the ball, right? So you're holding the ball, and then before you hit the ground, you have to release it. So you got deep dishers jump setting. It's going to look like taps, and the ref's going to call left. So I do like that you acknowledge that there's more than one way to skin a cat, but I would also suggest there is a not a overall default way, but a step one play, a step one training that allows them to play in all atmospheres. Another example: holding your platform, indoor, like that little for my amateur audience, that exaggerated hole where you leave your platform out there, feel dorky for like
Yep.
an extra half second,
Yep.
creates something called hard wall, padded wall, right? Like you throw a ball against a padded wall, it might
Yep.
come back at you the same way, or it might just drop. Throw a ball
Right.
against a hard wall, it comes
Comes.
back at you the exact same way. So what holding your platform does, right? The same way you tap a serve to keep it in, but when you tap it, what does the ball do? Does it drop? No, it just keeps going up, right? So that same principle applies to holding your platform. And I'm gone too far. Huh? I mean, we got real players listening to us. So I'll just shut up and skip that part. But
Okay, so but let me say,
yeah,
when
please.
I say one-dimensional players, I'm
Right.
talking about someone who will only let them only. Okay, you're little, you're going to be a libero and a setter. You're big, I'm
Oh,
putting you in the middle.
yeah. That coach is
That's
fired.
one-dimensional to me. And the
That
other
coach is
thing is,
fired.
oh yeah, well, with little kids, I'm going to say, hold your platform so that I can take a picture. I don't want it blurry. I didn't tell them I wanted high resolution. You know, some of those other kids know
Yeah.
high resolution, but I want it clean so that I can see exactly. Now, what I start doing is, you know, what's interesting? I started using this
That's
and put it in
awesome.
for passing.
Yes.
Okay, I've been using it since 2018 for hitting and, you know, serving to float it because it gives you immediate feedback. And for me, I just did a clinic in Montana this last weekend, and I was doing junior high, and they came out and they said they learned more in 1 hour than they've learned, period. But this I've used on passing because they focus on wrist and thumbs. And you know, you,
Wow.
you ask a kid, keep your arms together and let me take a picture. Well, okay, sooner, you know, 5-year-olds will do it, 6-year-olds. When they get 8 and 9, they think they already know, and they'll do this and put their arms apart, right? But this, you've got to hold it. You can't just do this, you've got to hold it. So what is it that anytime you're teaching, because if you recognize the today athlete, okay, one, they don't want to be told more than once, maybe twice. 3 times is way too many, and especially if you do it within a certain period of time.
Right.
And everybody talks about discovery and let them discover this. Why not give them something? Hey, when it floats, it does this. When it does this, it's not floating. If it doesn't go over, the lift wasn't in the right spot,
There it
or it
is.
was too low. So now, guess what? I don't have to say nothing.
Yeah. Well, for me, two things. Go. I'd like to start present the past. Uh, like the learning curve and like you said, discoveries. If a coach wants to emphasize that and I don't want to sound, trying really hard not to sound like a crabby old guy. You have to know how to teach it, right? You want to talk about discoveries and this and that. You have to have some kind of level of experience, either through tons of research or just tons of time on the playing field, what those discoveries look like. Because most of the time, a good coach already, like at the end, if you're doing discoveries at the end of practice and maybe you're huddled up, a good coach probably already knows what that player is gonna say, right?
Right.
Um, and the other part, like 3 is a lot, but, and this is where my challenge comes from, and this is where my degree in theater performance comes from,
Uh-huh.
which requires an entire senior year of Shakespeare, which I loathe getting into it, but when I got out of it, I'm like, this ain't so bad, you know.
Oh my
This above
goodness.
all to
Theater.
thine own self be true. I could go with that. Uh, um, if you do the if you speak in a rhythm that helps the kid remember it and recite it in their head and in their psychology, you'll be surprised how it comes in things of 3, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, um, like passing, right? Um, one move, straight and simple, hold. It's like a
Yeah.
rhythm. Da 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 da
Yeah.
da da da. One move, straight and simple, hold. One move, straight and simple, right? Smoking, Joe,
Yeah.
Frazier, Jason, Billius. so, I've actually divided some of those basic rules because of my experience, well,
Uh-huh.
my training and not just any acting school. Marymount Manhattan was at the time was ranked number 2 in the country.
Uh-huh.
I got lucky, got good, got in, and everybody's like, well, what makes you an expert? And I'm like, my degree in theater performance. And the other coaches are looking at me like, you're training in theater performance. Thanks to you know more than us. I'm just like, it is what but the kids love it. That like, um, Yeah, like everything in this. If well, again, if you don't know how to do it, don't do it.
Yeah,
Don't do it. Ain't gonna, someone does what I suggested in this podcast and it doesn't work. They're gonna be like, that guy stinks. He's for the birds, right? Of course you are, because you we're coming in to the situation with a different given set of circumstances. That's the nicest way.
sure.
I'm trying to be nice. That's the nicest way I know how to say it.
Now, that actually was pretty nice.
Yeah, it's pretty generous considering like who we are and our general intolerance for willful ignorance.
Yeah, but you know what? When you present something, you think of this. Okay, so I'll never forget. I was at the 2003 AVCA convention here in Dallas, and Andy Banikowski came by, who was all-time greatest coach UCLA. You know, how many national championships, won over 1,000. You know, him and Russ are all at the same level. And he came by and he said, I don't know how you do it. How can you possibly train kids at that age?
Yeah.
Because if you realize they really grasp so many things from that age 3 through 8, it's when they start 8 and 9 and they come back and one kid will say, she's been with me 2 years. She goes, I went to a clinic and they told me that this is better than that. And I said, well, I think you need to ask that coach why it is better. And then if you want to come back and you want to be open to learn more, then you can come back. And most people say, you can say that to an 8. I said, yeah, because by and large, I'm not going to have an 8-year-old tell me that I'm doing something wrong. Now, if they can't understand what I said, it's like 2 of the kids said, Coach Ruth, sometimes you don't make sense. And I go, oh, I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I thought I made a lot of sense. And then I listen to a recording that I've done and I go, I didn't make any sense.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that's what makes a good coach. Self-examination, right? If they don't get it, is that a her thing or him thing, or is that a me thing? Right? Dude, you just mentioned that your system is more popular in 28 other countries than the USA, right? And when you said that, my question is that a Ruth thing or is that a USA thing? Right?
Well, you know what, Jason?
Spoiler alert. We
let's
know.
be honest.
Uh-huh.
When you get over 50,
Uh-huh.
and I'm way past that, people don't think you know anything. But everybody always says, Ruth, you've forgotten more than most people will ever learn.
Yeah.
And you think of this, you expose yourself. I wanted to expose myself to the best in the world when I was playing tennis. So I would play in tournaments and hope that I could play Billie Jean and her brother.
Right.
So I would take lessons for Darlene Hart in Los Angeles, and I'd get on the Greyhound bus and drive an hour and stop at Woolworths, which was like a pharmacy place, and have a hamburger and that, and go take an hour tennis lesson. Pay $100. We're talking $100.
And back then that was like
1996.
Yeah.
1965. Sorry, I wanted to remember.
You live in Harlem. That's half your rent.
No, but
depending on where you live in, that's half a month's rent.
So people think, okay, I surround myself, because we always say mentors and role models. Okay. My first role model, because many role models you may never meet. My first role model was Coach Tom Landry of the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. 40 years later, I was in business with him. He was exactly like who I thought he was.
He's the last guy to wear a suit, right, to the field.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And a hat. Went with Billy Graham, flew around in his. But my point is, those role models, just because, and mentors, just because they've won a state championship doesn't mean they've been exposed to bigger pictures. It means they're successful. But what my success was, I wanted to be around the best coaches in the world. When I selected coaching volleyball over tennis in college, I coached men's tennis and I coached women's tennis. Mm-hmm. And tennis was my thing. And, besides other sports, then I said, okay, I'm going to make $5,000 for volleyball and I can stay indoors, or I can stay outdoors and make $4,000 and do tennis. I'm going indoors,
So yeah, sorry.
So anyhow, so it's who you surround yourself with. And I think the thing is this, so you're over 50 and I just think people think you don't know. I mean, I probably stay up with more things that are going on. Now, I don't stay up necessarily with the men, but I do if it's a men's team that jumps really well, because the physicality of coaching men's, I did men's club team. As a matter of fact, someone put on my Facebook, he says, I don't think people realize how much you helped us, because in the 70s, there were not black men volleyball teams. And we were integrated because we had a Chinese setter.
And what's changed with that with the men? What's changed with that, right? Name me one African American guy in the Olympic Games on the men's indoor team. There's not one.
I said that. No, I said to Dane, I said, you know what? You're the solo. You know.
Yeah.
But my point is.
And do you know what he had to do? He had to win an NCAA championship, an AVP championship, a gold medal crown. He's got titles as a player and coaching. I mean, geez, what's a black guy got to do? Invent the Mikasa, to be in the Hall of Fame. That's like a dentist having to invent teeth.
It's interesting because things really, someone says, Title IX's really made changes. And I said, no, I don't consider that. I said, the men still get more and we get more, but the men still get more.
Right.
Maybe not in men's volleyball, but I'm talking about more.
I agree.
And I said, the most important thing is when you're into all this politics, and I listen to all the things that are going around in the world.
It's a wild,
not just
you listen to Political Orphans, it is a wild three people, me and those two guys. We are just.
But I think the thing is the game has not changed. When people try to say, it really has changed. I said, tell me what's changed. You have more big people playing, okay? You have more women that are taller that don't want to run up and down the basketball court. They want to do volleyball. You can serve anywhere you want on the inline. You can jump and serve from the end. We jumped and served from the inline, but not in competition because we didn't think about doing it. Went to the metric system, but still people don't recognize there's no 10-foot line. It's 9 foot 10 inches, Hello, it's 59 by 29.6. And what else, has changed? The antennas came in, and that was during the time of rally scoring. And then the scoring. So what about the techniques? Tell me what is it that the techniques have changed? Why do people continue? Look at how long Chris Marlowe tried to instigate the step out when it was a slide. Remember during the Olympic Games?
Yes.
The step out. Okay, well, that went away. So I classify things in two things. They're fads and they're trends.
Right.
And you have to decide what it is, because you can't. I never did what UCLA did. They did offside blocker, went underneath the block. Okay. I called that the blue defense, starting in 1981, the blue defense, because UCLA was blue. Okay. We already had red. We already had white. And I said gold was rotation because I was at LSU. All right. So you kind of name things. But the point is this: where is the 1 foot takeoff? It started with the Texas. It was called the Texas 1 foot takeoff.
The Texas 1 foot, yeah. And then Cuba implemented it in the 92 Olympics. Like a Marine and Yoel Despaigne was an outside hitter. I've seen them do that, and it looked like a slide, but it wasn't. It was a step out, and it was a great split situation for a guy jump set, and yeah. Sorry.
So I think there's merit to have trends and fads, because there's always going to be. But I don't order a set of pins. I order a set of antennas.
Right. Well, for me, the only thing that changes is how's the ref going to call it. Okay. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. In 2001, first contact allowing it to be a double.
Right.
In fact, there were a whole bunch of rules the same year, right? Rally was the same. A let serve rule was the same year, and the introduction of the libero. Like all four of those things happened in 2001, and that was by the way, it was my first year as a head coach, and I'm just like, wow, I finally get to where I gotta go, and I have to adapt to these new rules. Thanks, guys. But here's my point. At the highest level, it didn't make them play any differently because the jump serve moves so fast. They were going to use their forearms anyway. But now what you're doing is you're screwing the lower levels, because if someone jumps in the air and they take both hands and do this, right?
Yeah, right.
To me, that might be a throw, but to the refs, that's a double, which is legal. But the throw, which is not protected by first hit, that would be illegal. So some of these rules don't stop like you said, on a general level, doesn't stop the way we train. Like second contact being legal. You watch the NCAA's, it still looks the same because they're still going to train their kids to be the same. But the danger in that is if you allow the people not at the highest level to play a certain way, it really allows the coaches to say, I want you to do it this way first. You know, and if that's legal and if the rules change, then they have to change where the highest level, regardless, just stays the same. So my argument is, yeah, cool. These rule changes don't affect the Olympic Games, don't affect the highest level. But try watching a D3 game. You know, I mean, I was coach at that time.
Sure.
Me and Chi DiMaggio, Patricia, we were building a City Tech from the ground up. We didn't have a club team, right? And we were very lucky, to have good foreign players that had mad skill. But
Sure.
every team we went against Ramapo, I'm like, that's Team Chuck. Just right. And some of these things I considered throws, but the refs got together and decided it was a double, and very much. And I'll make a stronger argument. Stay with me on this one. Before 2001, I want to remind everybody. Taking serve receive with your hands was not illegal. It was only illegal to double it, and it was only illegal to carry it. But here's what the refs did. The refs did not like it because they believed that no one had enough whiskers under their chin to actually do it and do it clean. So if you put your hands up, they blow a whistle. You look for the ref. You look at the ref on the call. He's gonna make up something because they got together and decided this purity of the game type whatever, and a legal move was deemed illegal by their arbitrary collectiveness, right? And then when this became legal, they're like, no, that's not a double, that's not a carry, because they said so. So you're right in the sense that it didn't stop the way we were training players to play the right way, right? So the highest level is kind of the right way because they're all serve receive technically sound, the whole this and that. But it really, really made affected the way lower level coaches and lower level teams and the refs navigated how they wanted to do. And I think that's where we lost a lot of our players. I think that's where I know correlation is not causation here, but I think that's where we lost a lot of our players.
But you talk about 12 and under. And you're okay. I think because Debbie Green and I were talking, who set for the '84 Olympic team, and I still consider one of the best setters in the world.
Oh, Debbie Green?
Yeah. And
on the female side, yes. 100%. And
we were talking about the whole why Ruth, you spend time develop a ball. This okay? She understood that because kids they're not big and strong. Why a 10U competition ball? And I said, what happens is, if I were coaching 12s, I wouldn't necessarily pick someone to set the ball with their hands first, because now I wouldn't not stop teaching them to learn that skill, which I do. I teach them to catch and set so they at least get their hands in the right spot and they understand to move their feet to the ball. So, but when we're doing some combination drills in, game-like situations, I want them at 8, 9, and 10. I want them passing the second ball so they can be consistent. So in getting in their head, keeping the ball in play and being consistent with what you do makes it more fun. Now, the other team might not like it. Even though they pass it back, it gives you a chance for all of you to do that. But I think what happens, though, is that if a coach is trying to tell a kid at age 12 and the kid is 10 or 11, go ahead and jump because it'll help you get the ball higher.
Right.
Well, now it's not a jump set. I'm jumping to get it up higher.
So you're talking about the jump on the finish?
No, you jump when you start.
Oh, okay. You jump on the
start. So that's going to give me some height. But now I got to change that timing the next year or two. So why not just let them pass it until they get strong enough? And so Debbie says, well, one of the things in what you're trying to tell me is you want a lighter ball so that those coaches who don't teach setting so that they learn that kids can set. And I said, Yeah, that's
Yes.
one of the
Because
reasons.
you're training them to set.
Yes,
You're not just gonna throw them in a game and say, "Hey, good luck." No, you're training them to set.
right, right.
And Ruth, by the time you're training, by the time they get to a place where they can set, the ball won't matter, right? Like you just said, your our girl you just mentioned, who I agree was like one of the top two setters in
Debbie
indoor.
Green,
And
yeah.
yeah, Debbie Green is gonna set a beach ball. She's gonna set a volley ball, right? That little rubber ball they have, the blue
Yeah,
ball or whatever. A
yeah.
volleyball's wow. By the way, she's like grass or whatever the new AVP ball. She's gonna be able to set with the same trajectory and still give the hitter that she's setting the range they need and the location they need to perform the best they can. But it can't. That's the end game. You're talking about this starting point that
Yeah.
allows them to set with different balls. In fact, under 12 has a different ball. So I'm glad. When you said that under 10 has a different ball, I'm like, wow.
It just came on the
Ruth
market
took
last week.
something. So I'm like, so Ruth is telling me she took something that I thought the 12 and unders got right by having their own ball, and said, I'll go one better than you guys.
No,
Here's the tens, baby.
yeah, because you think of the size, the strength and the size of kids at 8, 9, and 10. There's a big difference because they pick the big kids that are big and strong and put them at 12s. Okay, so now they have 11 division, but they're still using a 12 ball. And somebody said to me, I tested it for like 6, 7 months in the facility that I'm in. There's like 6 or 7 clubs in there. They all loved it. And they said, but so and so won't use it. And I said, let them play open. But you're talking about 75% of the kids, if they can
Amazing.
have fun and they can be successful. I look at it this way: more kids, more money. Okay, that's what you care about over there, somebody. Okay, I think more kids, more success, more confidence. They love volleyball. They're going to be watching volleyball. You're going to have more people participate in volleyball. I
Yeah.
think differently than the dollar.
Well,
That
you
dollar
think
sign.
differently also in terms of how you affect a kid's life, right? Like, uh, uh, people see the more conspicuous end at their teens because that's the last part of their development, right? You're talking
Uh-huh.
about if you're talking first chakra all the way up to 6 and 7, right? Where the body finally slows down growing or stops growing, the human psyche still has 2 more years after that. So that's the one that's the most conspicuous. But you're starting here to here to here. And I also think you're thinking in terms of how do I affect that kid's life going into volleyball? Will they still like it? Will they still, and if they don't like it, will they still remember? Will they still take some of these valuable lessons, right?
Mhm.
And this is for all the coaches out there. This isn't for Ruth, who like already commands respect just by opening her mouth. Like you could have known nothing about this woman's resume, right? She has 500 career collegiate wins. I mean, they could have known nothing about you, and 15 minutes into the conversation already know your stuff. But this is not for you or me. This is for them. If you're teaching a kid and like 5 years later she's in the JV game or varsity game, right? And she sees you in the crowd and she breaks character and goes, "Oh hi," like in between volleys in the middle of volley or whatever, and not like locked in. You know you've done something good.
Yeah.
When you have a kid, like I have a girl, Natalie Muskowski. She plays for
Uh-huh.
UC. She's finishing her last year at UCLA. She's on the beach team. I think she's on their pair 2 or whatever, and she doesn't look like terribly imposing, like huge. She's not an
Uh-huh.
average size block. It doesn't hit hard, but she just scores points all the time. She's perfect. But that journey from 13 to 14 to 15 to 16, where me and her mom and her we're attached on that level where
Yep.
if she sees me like on the switch off, she will break character. It's not
Yeah.
like this. It's like, oh my God, hi. So, and I don't mean to chest my. I'm not using this time to thump my chest. I'm using this time to tell other coaches, who do you want to be, right? If you're
Yeah.
about that dollar, I get it. This is your full-time job, right? And you want this to be your sole source of support. And if you suck at farming apples, right, or selling spatulas, right, then you do your thing, man. Make your
Right.
money, right? But don't forget about the little things. Don't forget about that thing where someone sees you years later and there's this level of appreciation and respect where they desperately, not desperately, whether they say it by mouth or not, they're saying thank you. Just saying thank you. And this is bring your own parent. This is just bring your own parents. This is Ruth Nelson, right? You know, like you came on episode 162 and you're like, I got a question, Jay. What took so long? 162 episodes, you never asked me. I didn't ask you because I was not worthy. Okay. I was like, man, if I'm going to ask Ruth to come on this thing, I better pay some dues. Let's have some club coaches on. Tom Chaffins, come on, you know, right? Let's have some college coaches on. John Mayer, come on. Twice. In fact, come on a second time. Dame Blanton, let's have a conversation about biomechanics. And now I finally land Ruth not once, but twice. Let's explore college a little bit. You actually, we'll mix and match a little bit. You spent 12 years with the national team. You had quite the journey on different levels of coaching. I guess Special Olympics, assistant coach, head coach, whatever. You mentioned someone by the name of Jim Coleman. Who is Jim? For the audience. Right, okay. We got to pretend for a little bit instead of sitting here having this conversation of inside jokes, right?
Knows, right?
Yeah, right. So, who's Jim Coleman?
Okay, so for those that didn't know, you know, when the antennas were outside the net, he was the guy who fought to get them in. When there was some statistics or testing of rally scoring, he was right there. When there was any. And he was a chem teacher, but he was a statistical guy too. But he was at a small college, which was predominantly YMCA, which was called George Williams College in Downers Grove, Illinois.
Yeah.
And the gym that was there was like almost like what you would consider a round with all windows. Okay. So in reality, when the flip of the coin, you had to make sure you were on the right side when you started, because when the sun came up and got hot, you couldn't see to return the service.
No. Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, we'll pick that side. We're picking that side.
That's right. So, but he was the men's Olympic coach, and he was involved all the way up until 2001. And when I was on my way back after undergraduate school, and I was going back to New Hampshire because I taught tennis at a private tennis camp in Franconia, New Hampshire. And I had a job there. And this guy named Bill McKenzie, who was one of my first coaches, who his daughter, Joy McKenzie, now famous, you know, he was coaching with Fran. She was Zelenkoff. She was the regional commissioner of the Colorado region. And when I was going to school in University of Northern Colorado. So I knew him there. So I was kind of stopping by to see him. And we were on a show one time and somebody says, Ruth, you're not going to say that, are you? And Joy got on and says, oh yeah, Ruth used to date my dad. And so I was going to stop and see him. So I met Jim Coleman there, and I didn't really know who he was, but he said, you know, you need to meet him. And so I talked to him, and he goes, well, what do you think you're going to be doing next? And I said, I don't really know. You know, I'm getting out of undergraduate school. You know, I graduated in 3.5 years, and I wasn't a good student, but I want to coach. And he says, well, you know, we have a graduate assistant position open here. And I said, well, let me come back by on my way back from New Hampshire. So I came back, and by and large, I ended up graduate assistant, getting my master's degree in passing and serving in men's volleyball in the Midwest, the 3-point system, which he designed. Okay, the 7-point system across the net, not the 9-point, him and Val Keller, they designed that. And Jim wanted more numbers in front than he did behind, because it was a 51, and then they put more numbers, and it became a 71.
Right.
And so when people are talking about tempos, Jim was doing that in the 60s. You set a 7 position 1 foot high.
Yeah.
You set a 7 position 2 foot high. Well, everybody thought all of that system, the tempo, somebody just named it tempo, right? And Ari started using tempo. So I taught everything except gymnastics and swimming, and coached men's tennis and coached women's volleyball. And I had about 4 players that were older than I was, because I was only 21 years old.
Right.
So he was my advisor. He taught me how to set. Sent me to Walmart at the time, buy a plastic volleyball, take it in the chemistry lab, tape a hypodermic needle, put it in, and put half the water in the ball. That was how I learned how to set.
To make it medicine-y. Yeah.
Yes. To make it move every time it puts you in that position. So think of this, because I use this. This is the closest thing that I have to it. So it's a big puffer. So when I catch it, I can either do this or I can stabilize my hands. So how many times do setters misjudge the pass? Because, especially at younger age, because they're not sure. They don't have the experience. They don't have the hand-eye coordination. So that ball weighted it. So I might take it here and I could still set it. So he was my trainer. Okay. Then I went on to the went on the national team and played for Moo Park, which he coached the team in California. And then I went back to Chicago. Oh my God. Did Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance. I was a sales agent, did all that. Then I moved to Texas. And then I played for EPU, which was the national championship team. The teams really were the Shamrocks, the Renegades, and the Rebels in Chicago.
Right.
And EPU. And so I came down to be a setter on Mary Jo and Maryland's team. And then that team became the second national team that I was on in 74. And then that team then became the 75, which Ari was coaching. Well, Pat Zartman coached the team too. And that's Sharky Zartman, his husband. He coached the team. And then Ari took over in 75, and my friend paid him to be the head coach. He was an oil man here in Texas, Bob and Shorty Lindsay, who became the CEO of USA Volleyball. So then that put me on that trail. Then I got upset, and that's why I would tell the viewers, never make a decision when you're injured, because you never think straight. And I had got injured in Italy when I was playing for Ari. I was practicing without shoes on, and one of the players were practicing on quick sets behind. And I set and I turned around to see if she was outside or inside. She came down and broke my little toe. And
because she landed second. Yeah,
that's it. So that was it. So then I became his assistant coach then. So then and then I took, the job at Houston. And then when I stayed on that, it's like all of this kind of moves in a direction. I became the 79 World University Games coach when I was at Houston. And then came along, I was playing regional tournament at LSU. And they didn't have the nets up the right height, and the court wasn't right. Because remember, we changed it to 59 to 29.6. And I could walk in and I could see the court. I mean, you're talking, that's a big difference. You could tell that because, former player. But you got to remember, during the time, the 8 years at Houston, I played in the off season with my college players. That was legal. So I was still playing.
Yeah, because nobody cared. No one was watching.
That's it. That's exactly.
It became a moneymaker. Everyone's watching now.
But, it's interesting when I was playing in coaching at the same time at Houston, I was playing with Flo Hyman. She was on the national team at the time. I couldn't be named the assistant coach because they were afraid of my amateur status.
Okay.
So I was a volunteer that 1 year.
Okay.
And then those rules changed. And then, then I took the LSU job after the AD says, hey, Ruth, were you interested in the job? I said, no, you couldn't pay me enough. So she's, it was $34,000. So I had a chance that year to either go to Illinois, Ohio State, or Texas. And I had already committed to LSU.
LSU, yep.
And I was committed. So I went there. Then I coached the 84 junior national team, which then a lot of those players became the 1988 Olympic team. Then I coached the pros, Major League Volleyball. Now the reincarnation of Major League Volleyball's come back. They're using our name. I wonder if they even knew that. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, then that came along and I did the pros. And then during that time, I had a 12-year span of being on the national team and then having an open door policy with Ari. Okay. So this whole time I'm being mentored by Jim during this whole time. And then Ari comes on in 75. And, you have an open door with Ari only if he trusts you.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't trust you, you're not getting in the gym, during that time. Because we were trying to beat Japan. We were trying to beat Cuba. And Ari, being from Israel, it's like, okay, who's coming in here and taking our information to beat us, right? So I had that open door policy, which I traveled with them. Norseka championships, going to Japan. And Japan, by the way, Japan they said, if we can't win, we want USA women to win.
Right. And
they supported us by having Rita and Flo play on their practice teams and play. That's so the cool money they made funded our national program. I remember bringing, you know how you can bring $10,000. Well, now
Yeah.
you can bring Bitcoin on your thumb drive.
Duh.
But at that time, you could only bring 10,000. I remember bringing that kind of money back.
That's awesome. Listen, and that's, dude, I mean, in that time period, that's money. That takes care of it, you know? People don't have an appreciation of what $10,000 was in that time, right? Like I can go back to the 90s. You're going back further than that, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know, and
yeah.
I
70s.
yeah, like I played for a military team overseas. I made what, 78,000 for like 2 years, but that's 92 and 93 or like
And
or
now you can
you
get
know, and that's
60,000 for playing 6 months in this pro league.
yeah. Oh,
It's
good.
like Michael Jordan
Good,
said.
because the beach, that's not, I mean, unless you have sponsors, you don't, come on, man. The last Hermosa Beach Open, I think the first prize is $15,000. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Also, the training, you got to pay your coaches, you got to pay, you know, if you don't have good sponsors, you got to pay for the trip. And mind you, the 15 grand is only yours if you win. That's first. That's if you somehow, some way win the whole thing. You and your partner get to split that. So yeah, I really love what indoor volleyball's become because one, the coaches kept their promises. Two, the players are delivering. And three, finally, the college networks gave them a platform because they've indoor has always done a good job keeping their promises and just hustling and making the game interesting. Because anyone that shows up live to a game, it's like electric lightning in a bottle. But now, like Longhorn are their cable network started showing
Yeah.
it. Big Ten,
Our network, yeah.
Big Ten, it became the third most viewed sport, only behind men's football, men's basketball. You like that? I do, right? ACC, they became their third most viewed sport, right? And now, all of a sudden, this sport, which was just West Coast dominated, has now turned into multiple seasons where the Final Four is Louisville, Pitt, right? Wisconsin, and of course,
Right.
time tested because good coaches always find themselves at the scene of the crime at the end of the season. Nebraska.
So,
Um,
okay, but here's a question for you. Who had the first volleyball network in the 80s, early 80s?
I don't know because the first time I saw volleyball, it was CBS. CBS was the only one showing it all the
Tiger
time.
Vision.
Huh?
We started it at LSU.
You did?
The first that 4 years I was at LSU, we played 18 of the top 23 teams in the country, and all of them came in on guarantees. And it was filmed on Tiger Vision.
And do you know what LSU and Japan have in common? They understand that persistency is victory. They understand that consistency is victory, right? Like, even from back then to today,
Uh-huh.
there are two girls, Kristen Nuss and Taryn Clough, beach
Yeah.
players. Their last year together, undefeated at LSU, right? I mean, that's what people remember. What people forget is Taryn Clough played for Creighton. She's an All-American, and she made the
Right.
Final Eight before she played beach, right? But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the culture, the support, and the discipline that LSU. Like I didn't even care about LSU until I took a trip to New Orleans, and I'm like, yo, this place is a trip, you know? And
Yeah, but in the 80s,
yeah,
you got to remember that okay, you can say that they're in Texas, they do girls in sports. Hey, it still is men's
it
state.
is. It's football.
And
It's football
Louisiana is
country.
the same way.
Yeah, it's football country. It's very much like
Yeah,
Texas. Louisiana
absolutely.
is Texas with better food, right? That's what Louisiana are like polite New Yorkers. You got good food, but the same like realness. There's no phony people there, you know. And
Well,
I don't even know why I
they're
brought them
big
up. I brought them up
supporters
because
here.
I'm in love with that team. I'm not a fan of players as much as I'm more of a purist and a fan of the sport.
Okay.
But these girls showed me that there are exceptions to the rule, you know, like I have a friend, Sean Ledig, calls me up midnight. Hey, Jay, I got these two girls, man. He says, I'm telling you, they're for real. They're for real. And this is before anyone even heard of them. Like she was playing her third year with Coppola, right?
Yeah.
Kristen Nuss, who's like 5'6", and her
Yeah.
partner's 6'5". And then they come on the podcast, right? And this is before everybody knows who they are, right?
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, they go to their first AVP main draw, qualifier, main draw won. They go to their first international tournament, qualifier, main draw, 1, right? And here I am sitting in Hermosa Beach in Manhattan Beach, right? The mecca of beach volleyball, and no one's talking about them. And I'm like, what do these two girls have to do to get on your map, right? And finally they're talking about them because and I'm not trying to trash USA Beach, but I'll just say it to the camera. They shamed you into giving them the recognition they deserve. Because they're like, if you don't like us, beat us. If you don't like us, beat us. And here they are winning and just winning. They were 37-0 their last year at LSU, right? And never mind the AVP, but the international tournament, they didn't have points. And they were told by USA Volleyball, stay with me on this one. They were told by USA Volleyball that in order to get points, you have to play with someone with points. And I'm letting the cat out of the bag right now. Their strategy was to separate them because Kristen wasn't the prize. Taryn was the 6'5", whatever. Because these coaches in their narcissism is like, I'm such a great coach, I can teach Taryn the same skill set the short girl has, and she'll have the same skill set except she's taller, which we both know is nonsense. So instead of separating to get points, they flew to Australia and they got the last spot in the qualifier with no points, knowing that if someone registered that had points, they'd be out. They took a chance. They trained there and they prayed and they waited and they trained, kept their eye on the prize, got in the tournament. Country quota, qualifier, main draw. 1. Do people appreciate how insane and how unprecedented that is to do on the international level? So now they have points after that, and I'm not saying they give everybody else the finger because that's not their virtue. They're really sweet girls, but that way of saying you're not going to separate us.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen it, they look like mother and daughter, for Christ's sake, stand the way like the height difference standing next to each other, but that'll make you a LSU fan. What?
Hey, let's go back to Jim Coleman just for a
Please,
second.
yeah, because I wanted to ask what he meant to you.
A lot of viewers may not know, but Russ Rose was at George Williams. He was in my badminton class.
Russ, so nice.
and Terry Liskavich, and I mean, you can go down Bill Neville. There's 2030 Jerry
the tree, the coaching tree.
It was unbelievable. And there is one thing probably that I remember. Well, there's probably 3 or 4 things I remember most about Jim, and that is he never, in all the 31, I don't ever heard him say one bad thing about anybody. Mm-hmm. Okay, no, nothing. Even interviews, even discussions, and I knew him that long. And 2 is he was always so optimistic about the future of volleyball and wanting to do what was best for volleyball. Not so much for him, but what was best for, he coached the Kenneth Allen team, and Doug Beal was part of that whole group. And, so there's so many people that came from George Williams, and George Williams closed down, and I think they ended up being like an Elmhurst. And the one thing is even Bill Walton, who was at University of Houston, he was a basketball player, and he got mad because he said he wanted to learn how to play, and I made him wear knee pads so that he wouldn't mess up his knees for basketball.
Right.
But I mean, there's so many of those people that have been out there coaching that came from there. But the other thing is he always believed that if he would go to a clinic and he would be taking notes, we're talking an Olympic coach. And he said, if you can't learn at least 5 things when you go to somebody else's clinic, then you're not listening, because you have to be better at what you do. And the most important thing is, it's like getting on the fads and the trends, finding out what is it that's really, when they did jump and block the serve, I never spent my time because I knew it wouldn't stay very long. I can practice that. I'll just serve short over them and make them turn around and have to play the ball. So tactically, I thought about how do I want to play against that? So you have to decide what it is. It's like, why is it, and everybody always talks about this. This is something, since I got to Dallas in 1995, and it was something I talked to Jim about. And I says, people don't train setters or defensive liberos, because you'll ask, okay, of the probably 14 kids I was training before COVID, 10 of them were defense liberos. And the question I asked them, how much time, if they're libero or libero, how much time do you spend on defense in practice? They go, I'm just passing off everybody. Okay. I asked the defensive. I said, how much time do you practice passing and not defense? And that's when it comes in is how can I and you know what I found? The most important thing is training those 12 players that did that position, that if I taught them all the skills, they had a better understanding of the game. If I understand the game better, I have a passion and love. If I have a passion and love, I have more fun and I stay in the game longer. That's my theory.
I have a question about the 5 things though. I guess I'll just ask straight up, and then we can just allow me to think out loud and make a mistake in this question, and then we can just rinse and repair. How many things is too much where it may cause paralysis through analysis, right? Like you do 5, I do 3 when you leave. And I'll spend, in fact, I'll just set a 60-second clock so I could keep us on mission here. Good, starting it right now. For example, John Mayer, who I consider one of the geniuses in volleyball, not just a hard worker, but an actual genius. After practice, he would, and I use this. He's like, Sarah, what's one thing you thought Terry did well? Sarah would tell her, Terry, and then he would ask Terry, what's one thing you want to get better at, right? So they automatically have 2 things, and the third thing happens organically on its own, right? So now you're coming in with this understanding in your process and preparation, right? But that's 3. And to me, I always thought 3 was just enough, and I thought 4, 5, and 6 was like an overload where they would suffer from paralysis to analysis, where they get, meaning for the audience, you get so much information you can't do ESH, right? You can't do whatever. So again, I'm not a right or wrong here. Just give me permission to think out loud. Is there a number that's too much?
I think it's depending on what it is that you're asking. If I say, give me the keywords on passing.
Yeah, I want you to help me shape the question. Yeah.
Yeah, wrist, thumbs, hands.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider that 3 things.
No.
I consider that 1.
Bam.
So that's wrist, thumbs, hands. I may say, all right, what is the one thing that you did at the end that you weren't doing at the beginning of the session that you really feel good about leaving the session?
Amen.
Okay. And another one would be, what is, and before you even start, it's like, I want to know what you've been doing in your last practice, your last competition. What's the thing that you really weren't sure of that you didn't feel good about? Because that's where we need to start today. Because I want you, and then I'll say, all right, now, do you feel better about that? Can we go on to the next skill, or do you want to do something else? And she'll go, I said, no, you're not convinced.
Right.
So you need to convince me that you spent enough time on that particular skill to go on. Okay, so that's another thing. So that's like a couple. Now, I want you to tell me, if you're in a group, I want you to be able to change. Let's switch and go BYOP. I want you to go to a new parent, and I want you to tell them 2 things that you did really well today. Okay, we switch all the way around. Okay, now, parents, I want you to tell your partner, which is not your daughter, 2 things that you're going to do to help your daughter when you get home this weekend. Because I want that parent to be able to understand things that they can do, that they can help their kids do. And then again, at the end is, tell me one thing that you really, really felt better about today that's going to help you this weekend when you go to Orlando. Ruth, I feel so much more confident in what I can do. I said, and are you going to have fun?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to have fun. So I'm not so much if it's, Jason, like 5 things, it's more of intermingling a bunch of things
that can really be one.
Yeah, it's not necessarily technical.
I got you. No, good. Thank you thank you for giving me permission, because this way it allowed me to shape the question that me, you, and the people watching, we're all kind of like answering that together. It's like, we're here.
Yeah.
And by the way, I mentioned John as a genius, and I'm not overselling that because I know the word genius gets thrown around a lot. But I think in the classical sense of the word, he's what I would call a true genius. Like everyone you've mentioned, all of these legends, they're smart. But a lot of it just comes from like hard work and, like you said, making mistakes, doing the wrong thing, doing the right thing, taking notes, and that shapes what they are now, which are living legends long after they're gone. They're remembered. Like Neville, like John Mayer, one of the drills is called a Neville. Okay, so he, you guys have shaped drills where they're named after you. So, but this guy is brilliant.
But you know what, Jason?
Yeah.
One of the people that people do not have the respect that they should have
What?
is for Ari Salinger.
Yeah.
Because number one is
he's on my list. He's on my list. Sorry.
Yeah, he went against all odds.
Yeah.
Because even though USA Volleyball didn't like what he was doing and finally fired him, and they had talked to me if I was injured. No, I would have never taken it, but it was been my dream job. But I wouldn't have done that to him because I was too loyal to him. Because do I agree with everything? It's no different than Debbie and I. She tells me stories. She goes, Ruth, you don't realize how much you helped me when you used to come to Colorado Springs every month and help me with that. And you don't think of those things, and people still say that because I wasn't there as an assistant because I thought I knew more than Ari. I was there as an assistant because I wanted to learn and I wanted to be able to support the national program as I learned, because I knew when I learned, I was able to do things better and I could try to test those things like each trip.
Right.
Rose said I'd come back and they would go, okay, we want to know what things Ruth brought back from Japan this time. They didn't tell me that until like 10 years ago, that those were things. But Ari did all the things that most people said could not be done. Now, did I enjoy the 8 hours a day training for 7 days a week, all those?
Yes and no.
In reality, but always open. As a matter of fact, he and I were texting this morning. It was like 3:00 over there, and I was going, and he sent me a congratulations. And I said, I just want to tell you this, that receiving Jim Coleman Award is the honor of any named award that would make more sense to me because of him being my trainer, my advisor, my mentor, a role model. But Ari allowed me to expand my knowledge and become the coach I was. And I wish when I was coaching the pros, I would have done more things in the pros. I wish I would have done them in college because I would have had more fun.
Let me go full screen here and show everybody the award. The James thing behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that. Yep. Guys, bringing you up to speed. It's something we probably should have mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. Wouldn't it have been nice if I actually were more organized with this? You're up for this the coolest award ever, and it's on the thumbnail. So to have all the particular details, like the thumbnail next to the link is the picture that I stole from you guys.
But you know what? If any coach is out there, if you haven't read Ari Salinger's book, you need to, because it will take you to a different dimension.
And what's it called again?
It was Ari Salinger's Power Volleyball.
Wait, I read that.
Oh yeah, because that's like 100, I don't know how many ever thick pages. And Gideon Ariel was the first one that started doing things, stick figures and how you transfer, because both of them were from Israel and they both studied over there, even though Ari got his doctorate from University of Illinois. But in there, he talks about his offensive system. And these days, everybody, it says like this, why are you going to set a slide, an outside in a BIC? Everybody on that side knows that's what you're setting. So why don't you have an offensive system numbering that makes sense? Because not every hitter hits the same set at the same ability.
Here.
So someone that might hit a quick one, maybe they don't hit a slide. And maybe if the blocker's over there great at blocking a quick one, then set behind, because it's an easier set to set. It's an easier set to set.
Well, I mean,
It's
you also have to consider what's easier for the blocker to block too. I mean, so they're right.
yeah,
I love when I'm coaching 16s. Is like, coach, I like my one ball a little higher, and I'm like, you know who likes that set better than you do, though?
yeah, the guy across the net.
I
No,
did.
but think of this. So, okay, so you got the BIC. So why no sets in between? Okay, so let's say, just for simplicity, so the viewers can understand this, everyone knows what a 31 is, okay?
Yes,
But let's set that 3-position 5E high. That's harder to block.
it
I got
is.
more angles, and I can do that.
Well, yeah,
And
but you're considering, but you're also considering all the variables, right? Like
right,
who's the hitter, what's his
right,
extension, what's his timing on it.
right.
The other team not used to seeing it, will it take a set and a half for them to make the adjustments? So yeah, you're talking real
Okay, no,
volley.
wait,
You're
no.
talking real
Now we
volleyball,
got,
though, huh?
okay, so now in backcourt, I got a 30. I'm in
Okay,
the 3 position and I'm behind. So I jump for a 31. The block is up. I set the 30.
right.
Now I got no block.
It depends
So
on the blocking scheme, though. I got to push back on that, right? Like
yeah,
there are some, like I've coached against. I mean, I feel like I'm ashamed to say this in front of you, but I felt like I've seen it all to the person that's seen it all. There are some systems where they're running a 31, and this the reason why I even think you run a 31. You want to see if the outside blocker is going to pick it up and the middle just goes more soft zoned, like right hand,
yeah,
this or
yeah,
that,
yeah.
or does the middle go all the way over? If the middle goes all the way over, then like you said, that might be a play where the middle has to jump back, or in a perfect world there's nobody up and it's just
Yeah.
the other team just looks totally embarrassed by it, right? But if you're going to go, if you got that outside hitter picking up some of the 31, or picking it up, then you got to go ball, right? And now you have a
Right.
mile of line on the outside for the 4 outside or whatever it is, or for the number system you were talking about. But
But the
but
whole
the
idea is
31 is magical because it really tells you a lot on how the defense is. Like their coaching style, are they how
yeah.
are they setting up their block? So it
Well,
starts
it
with
tells me
that
whether they
31.
pass. Well, it tells me if they pass very well. If they
Ah,
pass very really.
well
But my
when you pass well, right?
yeah,
What do you do? Do you just you have to look on the high level? You just have to decide what you're going to give up, because in system it's almost an inside out. But to defend in system the best, when you scout out the team, you'll be like, okay, look, this guy out of the D zone, he's going to hit the hard line, but he's not going to hit in front of my defense. Do I just put my libero there, put his bulletproof vest on, and take the shot? In system, if you can beat my libero on that, fine. That's it. We're talking about in system because out of system,
right. Okay, so
control
let's
chaos
just
is
go the other side. Let's talk
yeah,
about, let's say 13s, 14s, 15s.
right.
More than likely, their blocking scheme isn't as sophisticated as you're talking about.
No,
Okay.
I learned mine in
So,
Germany. I learned it when I was in
okay. So
Darmstadt.
let's just say that they're used to blocking the one, and
Right.
then the slide goes over, and they go. So if you don't change the offensive numbers that you end up setting,
Mm-hmm.
you never can do anything to the defense.
Okay.
So especially if you're not as talented as the other team, and let's say that you're not as big, but you can do other types of sets that do other things to defense like anything else. My friend who coached at UMass Boston, Terry Congdon, 3-time All-American, I
Yeah.
used to do her setter camps for 10 years.
Yeah.
And she called one time and she says, Ruth, we're getting ready for regionals, and my setter and my hitter are having issues. And I said, okay, what kind? She goes, well, they can't match up and they're arguing about whose fault it is. I said, forget that. Hey, number one is, what is everybody in the region seeing you do? Hit quicks, right? All right. Number two is, what you have an issue with hitter, setter. I mean, you got a problem. They're not getting along. So you set that middle hitter in the 2 position, 1 foot high. I'll call it a 21.
Okay.
Most people
Little
call it a
push one.
misplaced. They call it a push. I
Yeah.
call a push a misplaced 2.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyhow, I pushed it over so that I can put it there and hit it. She called me afterwards and she says, you're not going to believe how good they were. And I said, yeah, because it's true. The other team's been seeing you do ones. Number two is the issue in the setter is resolved because it's a new set and they're going to pay attention to the new set. So my point is that in younger age groups, you're going to pay attention to only a quick, everybody says run quick. And I said, quick doesn't mean low. Quick can mean something where you
Right.
run a combination. And I said, when you're teaching the younger players, if you can only run what you can pass correctly,
Agreed.
you got to. So,
Well, you know what the cool thing is? There's some practices where you, some coaches want to run it low because it makes the middle get there on time, right? And then when they're on time and it's low, it's not late anymore. Now it's officially low. But I would do a 10-minute practice where I would have the middle, the setter set a four ball, like a four outside,
yeah,
or like a slow shoot or a go, and have the middle try to like take the go away from them. So I would have the middle try to, just for fun, just
I'm a
jump,
combination
just
person.
jump, no, jump and literally try to swipe
Yeah.
or take away, like block or like hit the ball that was intended to pass him. So I would have the hitter approach at an angle where he was like touching the ball. Touching the guy's four ball because he's running it on time. And the cool thing is, Ruth, when you see it in the game, right? And
Yeah.
the ref calls 4 hits because it hit the middle on the
Right,
swipe,
right.
and then you laugh because you're like, all right, we practiced that, and you pray it's productive, and it turns out it is.
So, Jason, question for you. Why is it that junior clubs aren't running any combinations?
I think it's because well, no,
How's that?
I'm not going to make excuses for them. I don't know why. I mean, I was trying to make up some kind of rationale. There's no, I as a juniors coach do it all the time, and I think that's where
But the majority don't.
no, they don't. They're kind of just come right at you. They're in system that system, right? And I think
Even the college level.
I
has
think
it.
well, I think it has a lot to do with the coaching. Like if you look at juniors,
Okay.
the program directors are highly competent guys, and they teach their coaches and they have guidelines. But I see a lot of active players who are coaches, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
my wife's gonna hate me for this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. But the narcissism that comes from players, active players, that just because they can play means
Right.
that they can coach, and means that they can commentate, and means that they know volleyball from different spectrums where those are actual occupations, right? Really upsets me. And again, I'm warning everybody, I'm not saying that they're incapable of it. I'm not dismissing that. I'm just saying that an active player will never hurt your game. That just levels out how much they can help. Right? And if they're limited in the only way they know how to help, that's what you're gonna get, and that's what we're seeing. We're
But
seeing
what's
we're seeing
interesting
basic
is,
plays because that's what they're limited to. Now, I'm not saying the program directors are.
right.
You
But
know?
there's one thing about someone who has played. So let's talk about levels of play.
Of course.
So let's just say someone who's played high school and college.
Yeah, because you need to stick up for them for a minute.
Okay.
I did.
Because they do have something that a coach who's never played before, and that is that they have game knowledge.
Right.
This is what happened when I was on the court, and I remember that happened.
Right.
So then let's go to the next level. So if you've played at a high level, now you know more game-like strategy that you can make adjustments. And let me do a similarity of Coach Landry told me.
Okay.
When I started working with him in the prepaid phone card business for the 1998 Nike World Masters games, we were the official telecommunications sponsor. And I asked
That must
him,
have been a fun gig, boy. Prepaid
Oh my
phones.
God,
What?
we had-
Mm-hmm.
I said, Coach Landry, what was the most memorable experience? Now, remember, he was my first role model, and I'm getting a chance to work with him. And he says, what was the most memorable experience you ever had in coaching? He said, when I was a coach player for the Jets. And I said, I knew the answer, but I said, why? And he said, because you can make instantaneous changes
Right. Boom. You're
right
out.
then and there.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that experienced player. So that experienced player, depending on what level, they always can bring back and put into more things game-like.
Right.
So those particular players should try to learn from people who have been around longer than them in the
Yeah.
training side, whether it's now, see, for me, I had a strength trainer at Iowa, and at LSU and Houston, I did it all. So
Can
my
you?
back,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
But you're talking about levels to this, and that's how I started the conversation. I
yeah,
started the conversation citing as a pretext that they're never going to hurt your game. You know,
right,
that's the highest compliment I'm going to give an active player who's coaching. They're
yeah,
never going. They're only going to help, and unless they're just an absolute idiot, then the rare occasion where they just can't communicate the same way they play.
but they
Uh,
can
um,
aspire the kids. They can inspire them
right, but that's
because of their ability.
but that's where I'm going with that.
Uh-huh.
They're limited to how they can help you based on their own experience and not what they haven't experienced, right?
Right, right,
So if you're talking about some guy that's never played starting out of the coaching block versus someone who has played, I'm not talking about it. I mean, someone have to be an idiot to think I'm talking on that level, right? Now
right.
you said as you continue to level up, we're gonna start being self-honest, right? If I'm sitting at a coach's table and I invite coaches for NBA, do I want Jeff Van Gundy, who's never played in the NBA, or do I want Magic Johnson, right, who tried his hand in coaching and
Right.
basically had the keys to the truck in LA, right, had the salary cap, had everything he wanted and failed, right? Does
Yeah.
this mean that MJ doesn't know anything about basketball?
Right.
No. I'm just
Right.
saying that they're two different occupations,
You know
right?
what? Hey, let's talk about Michael Jordan when he was interviewed, and they said, "Now, you've been
Yeah. he
a
said,
part
he
owner,
said,
and
heck
now
no.
do you want to coach?" He said, "I absolutely have no interest in coaching
Right.
because we had to first prove our value, and then we got paid."
Right.
He says, "Now you get paid, and you haven't even proved your value."
But I think what I'm trying to say is that Jeff jumping into basketball ain't gonna get the same opportunities that former
Sure.
players did. He played some high school, right?
Yep.
And I'm bringing up the NBA because the NBA is the only league that's driven more by the players than the coaches. Like if
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
situation where the coach has to go or the player has to go, unless you're Popovich or unless you're a Pat Riley, right? The coach is gonna go. 3 years ago, Coach Nurse from the Toronto Raptors won Coach of the Year and got fired. I mean, how do you win Coach of the Year the same year you get and the same season you get fired? That's crazy. It's player driven, right? So,
Yes.
and I brought that up because I wanted to use the most extreme example. So, what my argument didn't seem like a straw man fallacy, and I brought up coaching and commentating because coaching and commentating, you're talking about the gift of gab is a
Right.
different trade. This is why Stephen A. Smith, he has a podcast. LeBron James has a podcast, right? And Stephen A. Smith is going to make more money talking about basketball than and get more viewers. Stephen A. Smith has more viewership talking
Yeah.
about the game than LeBron has playing the game, right?
Yeah. Oh,
We have to understand. We respect the players because they can do things we can't do in our wildest dreams, you know.
right.
And mind you, I played it at a pretty high level overseas, but I
Yeah.
knew I'm like, okay, that was my best block, that was my best timing, that was my best reach. I tricked him, and he's still still OT. Okay, you're part of the 12.5 club. I'm part of the 11 club, cool. And you know how to use it. Got
Yeah.
it right. But two things, I guess, those that can't do teach, right? Those become
Right.
the great coaches.
Right.
Jason Kidd, right? Was a coach right out of the block. JJ Redick, I ain't giving him credit because he got the keys to the truck, and we both
How
know.
about Lark Birdsong at Houston?
Yes,
Great player, came there, and you know what? They expect him to do unbelievable things. But you know what? Maybe if he would have had the right staff under him,
yep,
he could have been really successful. But it wasn't like he could just jump into that.
yeah,
And I says, I think that's happened with volleyball. Okay,
Yeah.
here's an example. I know in a case recently, a coach with a lot of experience that they're older, and I'm going to say over 50,
right,
and they didn't get the job. They hired a younger coach. Now, if I'm the AD, I'm going to hire that older coach because I know they're going to coach for 5 more years. I'm going to get that other coach as an assistant, the one that I was going to hire, and I'm going to have that experienced coach train that coach. Now you've mentored that person for 5 years. Now you can go retire and your program exists. But why doesn't that happen? Because people are intimidated and not doing it for the right reason. You know
But
what you said? That's what of that
and I'm
whole
talking to someone who's
series.
qualified. I'm talking to someone who's qualified. You come from a coaching tree that you care about the sport, but you're also trained on absolutes, right?
All right, so
Like football, the Parcells coaching tree. All of
yeah,
those guys, Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, Tom Coughlin was his wide receivers coach, right? All of those guys have won Super Bowls after him because they're trained on absolutes. Do I go with the guy who has, just because he has a $25 million contract, or do I go with this guy who is he the better quarterback? I don't want to hear that nonsense, right? Don't talk to me about that mess. Who's going to help me win? This guy or that guy? Don't talk to me about the
okay,
money.
so of
Yeah.
all in 13 years
Uh-huh.
at Lovejoy, BYOP, 60%
Mm-hmm.
of my parents coach recreation.
Nice.
So I mentioned to Doug,
Ah,
this is the
you
future.
got Jedi's. You got
Coaches,
Jedi's.
yeah, coaches. Okay, but you know what it does?
Mm-hmm.
It better educates sport parents.
Right.
But guess what it does too? It pushes coaches to learn more because those parents are being educated.
Mm-hmm.
So the system rolls around because, okay, what's going to motivate a junior club 12-year-old coach to learn more and to get better? What's going to motivate him?
The coach. The coach has to plant the seed.
But what's going to motivate the coach to get better?
Um,
They're coaching 12s.
coaching 12s. What's
Yeah.
good? I guess what's gonna motivate him is maybe he comes out of a practice and he's not connecting with the kids, and he wants, like, I guess wanting what's right for the kid is gonna motivate the coach. That's
Okay,
that's
so
the best answer I know how to give. You know?
the times that I get people that come to me,
Mm-hmm.
they come to me when they're desperate.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I
I'm
should have
going to
just said
compare
that.
this. Okay, let's say the medical profession, you're having problems with your shoulder, right? Okay, when do you go to a chiropractor? When you're desperate, unless you've been exposed, right? If you've been exposed to a sports chiropractor, you know that there's no way you can go without having someone who's good. Because I know that because I've had one
Right.
all my career.
Right.
Right. So let's go back to this. So if you're coaching 12 and under and you just won the American division at USA Volleyball, well, we know how you get to the American division. Okay. I'm not ever discrediting that that's not a great accomplishment.
No,
but it is. But it doesn't
winning at every level is
motivate
something.
you
Yeah.
to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So they come to me when they're desperate. Okay, when are you desperate? When does someone come to someone when they're desperate, when they're coaching?
It's their when? At what point?
What causes that desperate?
Oh, loses, losses.
Okay, win loss. Okay,
Yeah.
There we go. So you win. Okay, so we first look at this. Are you playing open? Or are you playing club? Well, we got to play open because our whole club says we need. I said no. If you're not an open team, you should do 2 or 3 tournaments open so you can push yourself. But don't you need a little successes in order for the kids to feel good about accomplishments?
Right.
So I usually get that desperate person that comes to me when they are. An example, I have a player, they're getting ready for D1 college coach calls me and says, Ruth, can I send you a video? Yep, send me a video. I can look at it 5 minutes. Okay, this is what they need to do on the outside. There's only a couple things, move the approach, move this. Maybe their backswing is quick enough, but it's just a couple things. It's not a change, it's an adjustment. And to me, the terms that you use when you want to make a adjustment or a change in a player makes a difference on how the player receives your information. Because if they said,
Here.
hey, Jason, I want to be able to change your arm swing. Oh no, the first thing you're doing is I think the arm swing is pretty good. I mean, I've been hit. No, I said, Jason, I think I've got something that you can make an adjustment. And I said, okay, let's put you at 9 years old. And I just saw you hit. And I said, now, Jason, why is it that I don't see any spin on that ball? I said, do you think that's important to have the spin? And is it important to have the spin, Jason? Why?
If you're swinging, yeah, you're looking for a drop. No, to make sure it doesn't
Okay,
go. It doesn't go long.
I want to keep it in the court.
Yeah.
I want to keep it in the court.
Think
All right,
about
so
every worst case scenario, right?
Yeah. Okay, so yours is going out like 4 boxes on a sport court. So I come to you and I say, hey, put this like Steph Curry. You put it on your hand. Take this silly band, and I got it, and it's pulling my middle finger back just a little bit, enough that I'm now going to focus on that. How many coaches tell their players, focus, focus? Well, now I'm going to say, I want you to think about that middle finger, and I want you to point it right to 6. And I want you to see if you can get that. And I call it 3-4. If I do 3, it's going out of bounds. Or if the ball's in front of me and I do 3-4, it'll probably go in the net.
Right.
But I'll ask them to answer those questions. They do it and they go, oh my, guess what? I have to tell them, put topspin on the ball.
Yeah,
Very
and
simple.
I also think it helps. It's a good teaching tool to get them to not stop their swing, right? Like no matter what ball, you could have 10s ball onto 12s ball. We can go through a whole bunch of balls. I actually have balls on fishing line in my office. They're like all over. I like different balls, like on fishing line from like ceiling, like hanging in the so I'm looking at all of them right now, and the one thing that they all have in common is when you do this, right, and when you stop. And most of the time, some kids stop their swing to not hit long.
Yeah.
and what happens? Nina couldn't be more proud singing the song 99 Left Balloons, right? 99 and there one goes, baby. I think of you and let it go, right? Or however that translates from German. I don't know if you remember the song 99 Red Balloons or Left Balloons.
You gotta remember, I'm much older than you.
I know, but I don't know what you were doing when you were 40. Were you still hitting up the joints? I don't know.
I can tell you this, that I still don't understand how everybody wears a peace sign and they don't even know about what the peace sign really was.
It means okay. We're not going to say that on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I said, you watch. I was at the first Beatles concert in the United States.
Amazing.
Okay, so no, I've done that a little bit.
I think you and I, we're on some Forrest Gump stuff, man. As far as like right place, right time, I think you and I, there'd be an extra podcast just telling fun stories just about being the right place. And I'm hoping I get some of that before we finish. But
I would say this, Jason. I think that most people say, when I was in Montana, and 2 months before that, I was in Nebraska certifying 20 coaches for Go Kids. Because some people don't want parents engaged. So I started a Go Kids certification. So because people say, hey, I'd like to learn training 10 and under, but we really don't want to engage the parents. Well, rather than me try to convince them, I've gotten too old where I decide where I'm going to try to convince and where I'm not. And most of the time, I'm not going to do it. So I started Go Kids so that they could get training. And one of the things with the 20 coaches, 4 were from Montana and 16 from Nebraska. So I'm back to Montana as a follow-up with these. And I had a bunch of junior highs, and I did clinics Thursday night, 3 hours, Friday night, 3 hours. And then I did the coach evaluation where we do Zoom and I watch them play. And then next week I get on and we go over what I watched. And then I did a Go Kids, demonstration with little 9-year-olds. So I think getting out and realizing that there are more people that really do want to learn from people that have experienced things. It doesn't mean everything that I do is right, because if it's not working, I'm going to change it. But I have to convince myself over a period of time. Now, some things I like, for instance, a very simple one was, hey, broccoli, rubber bands, and celery don't work because they pop.
Right.
So that was a very simple thing. Okay, so now I got to go find something else. But I want to find as many things that I can do so that a player can have positive feedback that they see, that they relate it to game competition, so that in competition, they don't need the coach to tell them what they need to do. Because if I get it in the net, cross court, I either dropped my elbow, the ball was in front of me, or I did this. So those are simple things. You don't need someone to tell you that.
No, and I like the self-correction that goes beyond the obvious is obvious, right? Like as a former setter, in Germany I hit outside, but most of my career was I was a setter.
Uh-huh.
And if there's anything I really hated, like if I said an outside hitter, and it was never the middles, it was always the outsides because they're all divas, right? Like it's like the same way a wide receiver are divas in football. These guys need this perfect set for this mediocre swing, right? So it's like they hit the ball out, and it's always them hitting the ball out. The set, yeah, it was inside, it was that, it was this, and at a certain level, you have to. And this is a warning. This isn't just a Jason story. This is a warning to you OHs out there, right? If you're at a certain level, if the set was too high or it was too tight, you don't need to come up and be like, give me some space or whatever. The answer is because they know that, right? And in fairness to the setter, right? If the setter gives you a perfect set and you hit the ball out, the setter's not going to walk up to you and be like, that ball's got to go in, right? The setter's not going to say the ball needs to go in. Why? Because you know that. So I think a setter, and I'm defending setters here, of course, I'm biased, but the setter deserves the same treatment as you would expect if you hit a perfect set out.
Yeah, because hey, it would be just like you complaining with the passing.
Yeah.
So it's obvious. You pass the ball off the net. You don't need to say,
and
my bad.
just
Well,
divas,
yeah,
Ruth.
of course.
Divas. It's the one position where everybody says once it leaves the setter's hands, it's my responsibility. It's the one position where they talk all of that, but they're the first ones to be like, oh, it was too high, too low. I'm like, you know what? How about you take my next inside set and crush it? And when you do that, my I'm gonna have enough whiskers under my chin to dare to set proper, right? Because now I'm thinking less because I know he's got my back. And that makes a better setter, because if the setter's as good as you think he is, the location takes care of itself because he ain't thinking, he's setting. And I think that's what you're talking about. You're talking about your training, you're talking about your process and technique, the results of in the play and the corrections that become this animal impulse over thinking. I don't know if I'm saying that right. You know, what's the last thing you want to be doing right now? Thinking. You already, you know. So, to quote John Candy, there's a time to think and a time to act. This is no time to think.
Well, I think, when people say competition too, they, are you competitive or are you not competitive? I think of, Caitlin Clark talking about she was competitive in Monopoly
Right?
during the
Yeah.
holidays, and I was thinking, oh boy, I was just like that. No matter what, I do billiards and ping pong, and I'm ready. It's like when I play hearts with Flo, and a lot of people may not know Flo Hyman. She was probably top player
Oh, we know.
for 10 years on the national team.
Everybody listening to this podcast knows darn well who Flo Hyman is.
And
No, they're
Flo,
following you. They're following
hearts.
you. So
we play hearts, and she make up the rules along the way. And I go,
because you got to win.
that's exactly right. And I had never played hearts. That was in the 70s when she was 17 years old and still getting ready to get out of high school. And I was coaching at University of Houston. She goes, well, no, that's the rule. And I said, no, you just changed the rule.
It's weird because when you become comfortable in your own skin like me, right? And there's a lot of like alpha males that call me alpha because of this. There are some games I'm playing against someone, it means more for them to win. I just kind of give it to them, and they don't know I'm giving it to them, right? But every now and then when I have this bug, all of a sudden I show up and they think I'm crazy, and I'm like, oh, I'm crazy because you lost now, right? Like Central Park is like kind of my utopia when I was in New York.
Okay.
And I used the beach courts to cross train for indoor because I knew I had the muscle memory of the flat platform, so my legs are stronger. It's not like a beach player going in, right? So I go in, and if I win a game, I win a game. If I lose, I lose. But those guys playing pickup, winning pickup so much to them, right?
Yeah.
But every now and then, at the time I'm working a 9 to 5, right? I get out of work, they're there all day. I get out of work and I got that bug up my behind, and I have this different look on my face, and I'll win a game like 21-11, and they're like, "Are you okay? You look angry. You look." I'm like, so now that you lost, it's about my face, right? But it was always one of those things where I'm like, I'm gonna let you win, but I'm gonna come out of nowhere, and you're not, and and you're not going to know the why. And I'm going to look like I'm crazy. And that's something I wish I could fix. Maybe I should
But
just
you
be
know what?
competitive all around. This way they could see me coming, you
So
know?
one thought, okay, so you have a 10 and under. She
Hmm.
makes good grades.
Yep.
She's a good student. She's a natural student. Okay, we all know that she strives for perfection because she's good at,
Yeah.
at school, even if she works hard to get her grades. So to me, the biggest challenge is taking a group of players that are like that
Hmm.
and putting them in club and they're competing. It's all about frustration because they think of, okay, if I'm on the court, then I'm good. If I'm off the court, I'm not. So like an A for playing,
Right.
F for not. So
Yeah.
now you think about if you're training 10 and under, you have to think about the fact is what is it that you're instilling in that training session
Ah.
that's not going to make them so they can go and critique everything, but understand how it works so they can work on it to get better at it and to understand that you can't do the exact. It was interesting. We were talking about
Right.
how you teach something. I think there's a way you picture it, what you want it to look like. You analyze what a player's doing, and then you teach it. I call it PAT, picture, analyze, and teach.
Hmm.
So if a coach is wanting, most coaches, they see it, they know something's wrong. They don't know how to analyze it, so therefore they don't know how to teach it. So is it that skills now are being pushed to the side is because people can't analyze and teach the adjustments?
Yeah. I'm always, I become more skeptical in my older age. Like, can you teach this? Like, I don't know if you listened to my last podcast with Ashley. I
Yeah,
have,
I did.
remember I was talking about these ground rules I have about referring to studies and
Uh-huh.
applying these mechanical and biomechanical
Yeah.
studies based on
The research supposedly.
I like how we said that we were careful with the way we say research, right? And for those of you that missed it, I have the list. One, read the study in its entirety. Don't just go on it because someone famous uses it or implements it or wrote it. They wrote it. They more know it. They forgot more than you know. Like if you wrote something, uh, they should go over what you know, but how about read the whole thing in its entirety? Otherwise, they're
Yeah.
doing you an injustice.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Uh-huh.
Ruth has this study, but if they're not applying it right, then it makes you look bad, right? Two, read the variables, right? Are we talking about under 10s, like you said? Are we talking about teenagers, right?
Right.
This podcast alone, I steered us off the cliff 3 times and moved it to juniors and pros when you were talking about, right? You were talking about 10s. So I already made that mistake a minimum of 3 times that I could remember. Never mind what I don't. I've already done it 3 times. So this is why I'm saying be careful. 2, 3, never proceed or conclude with any training discussion or debate if you do not understand or if you disagree with the given circumstances. So if everyone comes in before we go and it's a fact that's this, if you don't agree with that fact and you think it's an assertion, you have to you can't continue the conversation without at least understanding where each other
Sure.
comes from, even if you agree or disagree, right?
Right.
We were talking
Right.
about you watched one of my political shows and it was just so frustrating because I'm like, you guys are going off of these facts
Yeah.
these aren't facts, you know. So yeah, so those are my thing, and I'm gonna joke around a little bit. Don't tell me studies show that I'm supposed to apply this to my teen boys team when the study was tennis, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. It wasn't tennis. It was volleyball. Was it girls volleyball or was it boys? Right? Was it
Uh-huh.
college or was it high school? Was it with a 24-person roster? No, it was nine girls.
Uh-huh.
Right? Was it a month? No, it was 6 days. And I'm just like at the end when you by the time you read all the variables, which should be disclosed, but by the time you read all the variables, it's like, sorry, studies show what you know. So I'm not dismissing them, I'm just saying I really wish coaches would stop referring to these studies where they are misapplying they have a misapplication of the studies in their practice, process, preparation, and podcasts, all the P's, right,
Yeah.
on a study that either they don't understand or they're misapplying. And
Yeah.
this is why you and I will always go with the experienced person, right? We were talking about the young kid who played D1 versus the older
Right.
experienced coach.
Right.
Go with the older one. Let that kid let that kid understand it's two occupations, and someday he'll be like that other coach or better, right? And
Okay,
this,
so think of this. Remember when they came out with rotation 1, 2, 3? The
yeah.
guy, I forget his
Which,
name.
by the way, I learned here. I
Okay,
didn't, yeah,
so
I
one
learned
of
here
the
in California.
interesting thing about that is that's great for someone who's beginning in coaching,
Yep.
but I'm not going to have an automatic sub libero in for this and this and this and this,
No.
because if you're going to do a sub, you're going to do it based on one. I want a sub only when I haven't moved everything I could possibly move around on the court to make sure that that person serving or receive or hitting the ball is going to change. I'm going to move it. I just believe that subbing is my last, choice. I might even consider maybe even a timeout before I might sub, depending on
Yeah,
the
well,
situation.
you're from a time period where they only had 6 though, so
Yeah,
you need to
yeah, okay.
disclose that to our audience. You played and coached in a time period where there were only 6. I think there's like 15
However,
now.
though, in college, no, 12. 12,
Okay,
and you could only
right,
enter 3 times. So,
gotcha.
yeah, internationally, yeah, but college 3, and,
Hmm.
the club and stuff. But one of the things I was going to say is we go back to those 11 of those 14 DS liberals that I train. One of the things that I see that happens at the club level is they're using passing statistics to determine which player is going to get to be on the court more. Okay, so now we're in a training session, and one of my players that I'm training, I've trained her since she's 8, and now she's 16. And she goes, and I said, listen, every time you're passing, this is what you're doing with your arms. You're pulling them back, you're pulling them back. She goes, Ruth, I need to do that so that I get better on my passing scores. Because if I'm not passing a 2.5, and I just went, okay, now, Ruth, you did your master's thesis on a statistical analysis of men's volleyball, and I did like 8,000, how many ever matches. And even at certain levels, but the idea behind this is you want the kid to feel comfortable to understand how to keep the ball off the net. You don't want the player to adjust bending my arms to keep the ball off the net, because my stats will be better. And if my stats will be better, I'll play on the court. Okay, so this last weekend, Montana, I asked 27 7th and 8th graders, what's the thing you think about when you get back there to serve? I said, I'm going to name some things, and then you're going to tell me some things. I said, but I want you to close your eyes, because I don't want you to look at anybody else, because some of you know each other, some of you don't. I'm going to say, you're saying, I hope that I get the ball over so I don't get subbed out. Everybody. So that tells me that players up here are thinking, how do I stay in the court, or how do I get on the court? It's by not making mistakes. And here's the parents on this side. They're doing stats. They're saying, I saw my daughter did a 2.5 and this other player did a 2.3. Now you got the parents doing the stats. So there's got to be an education, because one of the parents that was doing that was one that I've trained two of her daughters for each of them 8 years. Well, guess what? They were right. The stats they watched on the video, they did the stats, and the stats were higher than what the coach did. So now you develop a relationship where the parents and the coach, they don't. Now, if they're good parents, they won't say anything. If they're troubled parents, they're probably going to tell another parent.
Do
So
you see why
Jason,
coaches don't want parents in practice? It's like some of these guys
okay, so
some of these
you
guys
know
just
where I'm
stink.
going with this. So
Yeah.
stats are great if you're going to utilize them when a kid feels good about doing the skill. Okay, for instance, I go up and I hit. I don't jump. I hit it in the court.
Mhm.
But during this last week, we've been practicing on jumping. Am I going to encourage that kid because they got that in the court? Or am I going to encourage the kid that I want him to jump? I'm going to say, the things that we practice on, you can be a much better hitter and be able to hit more shots, more angles, and do more with the ball if you're higher, because you have more blank. And they go trajectory. So it's kind of like, a word, fill in the blank.
Right.
So
right.
to me, the stats, I mean, a lot. And I think statistical, like tryouts, I think using stats, and sometimes you need to use them because you got to say, I'm going to take this kid, not kid. I know a kid that their stats were lower and they didn't take the kid, and the kid was a 4-time All-American.
It's I mean, if you're looking at the stats solely as physical performance, right, and not the other,
Right.
um, we really need to know what the coach is thinking, right? Like, because I might ask that coach, how much of volleyball do you think is mental, right? And I'm steering us just to the cliff. You need to cut me off and make sure we don't fall off the cliff. All right, I'm on the Mulholland. It's really
Okay. Okay.
okay.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
I'm gonna ask that same coach, how much of the game do you think is mental and not physical? You're probably not gonna find one coach that doesn't give the mental more than 50%. Every single coach you ask, just as a survey, I'm not asking you because you're sometimes
Right.
you're impossible to read because you're way out there, or way up there. Some will say 60, some will say 80, some will be facetious. Oh, 99.9, right? It's all mental, right? But just as a general grasp, as a foundation, do we both agree that every coach we ask, pretty much all of them will say it's more than 50% it's mental?
I think coaches now do.
So, okay,
I don't
so
think that
far
would be
so
the
good.
same.
So far
Yeah.
so good. Now, as to the second question, how much do they teach the mental in practice? It's crickets.
See, but you know what?
It's
Though I think
crickets,
there's
right?
two
So how
aspects.
does that apply to the statistics? And is the psychological, do the numbers change because you're coaching something from the muscles between their ears, or some, all those things from the neck up? Sorry, you have a thought. Your wheel. I saw your wheels turning. Jesus,
And
go.
and in the last Olympic Games when Danielle played,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you take 96, the first Olympic Games. She played all the time.
Yep.
Okay. The
Yeah.
roles change each time. So you go through, the fifth Olympics.
Yep.
She's put in the middle at critical time. Now, she had to hit 80% in order to even be on the court. Okay. That's like making almost next to zero errors, right? So every time you touch the ball, you got to put the ball down.
Which even for
Right.
middles is impossible.
Right. Okay. So, but she changed the dynamic of the court with the players when she came on the court because of who she was, her enthusiasm, put the ball down, and all of a sudden, you can't even, how do you number that? How do you rate that? So you can have a person that's like, but parents never understand how come someone stays on the court and they make more mistakes than their kid. Well, guess what? When you start more, you're going to get a chance to make more errors. Everybody knows that.
Wait a
But when you
minute.
come off the sub, well,
Wait a minute. Were you talking Danielle Scott or were you talking Karen Kemner in '96?
Danielle Scott.
Because Karen Kemner, I don't know if you remember, they're playing China,
Karen,
and she
yeah.
was on the bench. And when they brought her in, just all this crazy thing happened, and now
Yeah,
they're competing against the Chinese. It was wild, but I do remember Scott. And I was like, what a great team, Elena Oden and
Yeah.
Endicott.
Well, that's my
Yeah.
point. How do you put a number on a person like that changed the I'll never forget. Ari said to me, he says, Ruth, why don't you increase your jump and you can play more? And I said, why is that? And he says, because when you come on the court, the team scores points. And I said, well, I'm okay with being on the bench. He says, why is that? Because I said, I love the pressure.
Right.
Give me the pressure.
And I think those are things that don't show up on paper. Look, let's go back to the '92 Olympics, semifinals against Cuba, right?
Yeah.
Cuba, I thought, was a heavy favorite to win, even though a lot of people thought Brazil had a chance. And the USA was overachieving. They beat the unified team. They did really good in the pool that wound up in that situation in the first place, right? It went to 5 sets, and Karen Kemner, who was a rock star the entire tournament, got 0 kills. Right. And to her, it was like this bad performance. But at the same time, you're not going to take her off the court because there are things that she brings that are invaluable. Like you just said, being on the bench probably helps your team. When I played in Germany, 6'1", Ruth, 6'1" ain't, even back then, 6'1" isn't tall for even for OH. I would only get in 3 sets. I get set the ball 6 times. We win 3-0. I'm good, because sometimes it's about the glue, that doesn't show up on paper. There's you and I. We can go on and on and on. Like '88, right? Bob Stavertley gets best passer in a tournament, right? Because they never served Karch because Karch is better, right? So Karch's stats are going to show up pretty naked on paper, right? So many things that come into play that we didn't even talk about. The psychological, just the mental thing I was trying to introduce. We didn't even scratch the surface. Those are just strategic and logistical things, not even the mental.
Back to the mental thing you asked. Okay, so can you actually teach? Okay, so I think that people are trying to separate mindset and mental toughness.
Hold on, I want to timestamp this, because this is probably the most important answer in the whole podcast, and that's saying a lot. We're at 2:09:22. Go.
Okay.
The mental.
So mental mindset, mental toughness, mental any type of toughness that you get on the court. It's funny because I had someone from Canada, she 2-time Olympic, was on my podcast, and she was a mental toughness coach, not a mental mindset coach. Okay, not a mindset coach, but not a mental.
Boy,
I mean, so there's all kinds of names.
That's a rare job.
I have almost enough hours for a double major in psychology from undergraduate school. So, we were our own. Wisconsin was the first one that ever had a sports psychologist in the 70s. So they tried to do all that. But let's go back to that. So what is it that you can teach? And do you need all of these extraneous people? For me, I don't know how a player on the court can focus on the game with 5 people on the bench and everybody doing different things. One's a libero, one's DS, one's setting, one's offense. Okay, so let's go back to that. So now I'm in a practice setting, and let's just talk 14s. You're doing 15s, right?
Actually, I was doing 12s to 14 boys at Evolution.
Okay, so let's say 14s. So what is it that you actually can teach during that particular training session that overlaps into that side? Okay, well, we all know that nobody likes mental toughness because they think of that as a negative. Okay, it's just like this. When I say that I'm structured, it's really disciplined, but it just sounds nicer. Okay, so you have a structure that you do, and you have to decide, if I leave somebody in a drill until they can do it, assuming that I've only said small quantity numbers. Let's say I want you to hit outside for 3 shots. I want you to go cross court. Okay, I didn't say where cross court. I didn't say deep cross court. I didn't say split. I didn't say 5-4 split. I just said cross court. So I lead 3 times. I want you in the line. Once you're out of the line, somebody else is going to work on that. Okay, so I'm working on just shots because I don't know how you get better. The game, I don't know how you get better just by playing. So my point is, somehow a person gains confidence by feeling it in their hands by doing it 2 or 3 times. Okay, so now they go out. Okay, now this time I want them to hit deep 5. 3 numbers, still okay. I'm still just tossing up, tossing the ball up, or, you can have the setter set it, but it's a repetitive drill. All right, so now I say I want 10 balls up, 10 to the corner. All right, now 10, they're in there like for too long. Okay, I got to worry about their arm. And it's really funny is I never did jump counts. And in 8 years at Houston, never any injuries, except when we had the pole, the standards were like this and somebody fell on. But outside that, no injuries. We worked 8 hours because nobody told us we couldn't work that long.
Yeah, I'm going to land on that pole.
Okay,
I remember
NCAA,
that.
we weren't that. We were AIW. But my point is, now that player, now you're overusing them. So instead, I want them to go do 1 ball. Okay, you did 1 ball. Nope, you're out. So now I got to refocus when I come back in to hit that 1 ball. All right, I said, okay, now you can do 2 balls this time. You can hit 2, but you got to get 1 in. So I think if you work those type of theories in your individual practice sessions, you can still work on game-like situations as long as you're putting some kind of parameter that's reachable. Challenging, but reachable. Okay, now I made that level. Like what we talked about, level up. Well, I'm going to level up the drill.
You are now a level 3 boss. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but I think this is my last theory is this. One is people get confused on old school versus new school. I say old school methods become new school ideas. Okay,
They
so
just changed the name. Like you said, mental toughness is like you might have a negative inference. They're going to change the word, call it something different. We're not doing mental toughness. We're doing mental toughness.
but I do think you can train in your practice, even with the 3 and 5 year olds. Like, this one kid who's really competitive. She goes, Coach Ruth, can we play? Can we play? And I said, I'll tell you what, we'll play for 5 minutes, but this is what you have to do first. I need you to be able to pass it up forward, like to the attack line. I want you to make your approach. We're talking about a 5-year-old. Make your approach and hit it over. I said, nope, you didn't do it. I guess we're not going to scrimmage. She goes, give me one more try. Okay, so guess what I'm doing? This is mental toughness. This is mental. She's putting a little bit of pressure on her. So she says, I do it, and she passes it up. Okay, she didn't pass the ball that well, but it was high enough. Did she jump high? No, but she hit it over. I said, okay, let's play 2-on-2 now. Because I think once you have that knowledge, you can make a player move up to the next level and they don't even know they're doing it. That to me is coaching.
That's real coaching. And I'll present a scenario for you, right? A boys team is in a game, right? It's 24 up. And I see this a lot out here in California. I don't, and miraculously, I don't see it a lot on the East Coast because the European kids, the immigrants, they're just different. They're 9 years old, Poland, this or whatever. I see so many kids, girls and boys, outside hit, they immediately just swing as hard as they can, position 6. And one of 4 things happen. 1, gets blocked. 2, hits the tape, maybe never goes over. 3, if it gets past the block, goes straight in position 6, who's disciplined and digs it. 4, it goes long, right? All of these just worst case scenarios. Or if it goes out, they're touch, all the time. Hit out, position 6, touch, right? And I think it's a coaching flaw because they, when tensions get high and butt cheeks get tight, which is what you call, and when mental toughness is needed, mental toughness is about defaulting to something that you're comfortable with, that you believe works, right? And if they believe that works, that's a coaching failure. Because they don't spend enough time in practice working on a default shot that produces results more often than not. We're not talking about perfection here. So if we had to define mental toughness, I would say it's maintaining discipline under circumstances that don't go your way. That's the best way I know how to define it. And if you're getting a bunch of reps where your kids maybe the default shots between position 4 and 5, just hard cross court, or maybe just high line, right? Or maybe it's something that's not going to give the other team points where they're just and they also have this losing is not an option mentality, and then they just lose. Losing's not an option, just loss. Losing's not an option, that's loss. You just and then their mental toughness starts deteriorating because, like you said, it has to start from this place where they work on a series of default shots that you rep where you're not thinking, you're just doing, right? And then you maybe have some practices. The score is 22-23 for the next half hour. We're playing, it's 17-18, you're down by 1, right? Put them in these situations, have your whistle, make a bunch of noise, during the jump, put them in these situations that are so turned up. When a game comes, it feels more, it's not going to feel exactly the same, but it's definitely going to feel less heightened. And this is where I want coaches, and this is not the podcast to crap on coaches, but this is where I want coaches to identify that. You're watching all this video, Jesus Christ, you're doing all this statting and all this number. You can't see with your own 2 eyes that in this situation, this kid is doing the same thing. How about just make a pull chart. Draw a bunch of lines, right? Draw a bunch of arrows, man. And look at that. How's that for a start? Just, pull out some crayons, for Christ's sakes. Put the iPad down, get some crayons out and start pointing some arrows. So,
but you know what, Jason, you can't, I look at it 2 ways, because I look at a coach that might be doing a lot of statting.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that's the way that they were taught how to do it, and they've not been exposed to other options. It's like, okay, here's an example. This 8-year-old, because her daddy's a coach and I train her since she's 4, she came in and she goes, you saw the pictures, Coach Ruth, on social media? I said, yeah, I saw you were charting on the bench. And I said, and then she explained, and I said, if you pass a 3, what do I get? I'm the server. She goes, what do you mean? I said, I get a 1. I said, you pass a 2, what do you think I get? She goes, oh, a 2. I said,
Call it
all
a
right,
wash.
you
Yeah.
pass a 1, what do I get?
Mhm.
She goes, a 3. And I said, if you get zipped by me, what do I get? She goes, there's not a 4. I said, oh, yes, there is.
There is now.
I said, a 4. She goes, so that means that when I'm practicing, now listen to this, if I'm practicing theory, you say, do kids learn during training? Yes, if you're teaching them. She says, so that means that in practice, if we have weak servers, my passing doesn't get better. And I said, well, I didn't say you weren't supposed to practice hard to pass those easy balls, but in theory, yes. So she says, then we are all of our servers. And I said, this is the answer. You're only as good a passing team as your weakest server. So when that weak server becomes better, your team becomes better at passing, because you don't know when you're going to get and who you're going to get. So don't just do passing stats. Know who the server is, because that server over there who served a 1 before, you've been passing them. So maybe you want to change your formation to let somebody else pass, because you know that person is the weakest server.
Agreed.
Did you see? Hey, we got to address this. The rules for 10 and under 11. Okay. They get to serve 3 to 5 times. You can do 3, or you can do 4, or do 5. You don't lose the ball, but you rotate and you keep it on your side.
Huh.
Now, it's a USA volleyball rule. Now you tell me this, I'm going to put my 4 best servers in a row. But see, now here in Dallas in rec, we do 5 serves and you have to rotate and the ball goes to the other side. Now, and they said, well, that's not really what happens in a game. And I said, well, 3 serves and then you rotate isn't in a game either. But that's a new rule this year. Now, is that helping? At 11 and under and 10 and under? No.
I, in my opinion, I don't think so. I agree with you. I don't. Yeah, so let me take this moment, because
Okay.
I actually have a recording cartridge that records up to 2 hours and 26 minutes. So I want to change it. The live stream's still happening. So I just let the live stream run and
Hey, while you're doing that, I
Got
put
it.
up a picture of Jim in my
oh,
fancy
look
hairdo.
at that.
in the
Nice.
70s.
Look at you and your 80s do. That's more like a 70s do. You know,
Yeah.
maybe you Bonnie Tyler up in the 80s, and I want to see some pictures of that too. Yeah. No, but the cartridges are 2 hours and 26 minutes a piece. So I got 5 hours, a total of I can record up to 5 hours. You know. This is only the 3rd time. You know. No, but the
Well,
cool
you know
thing
what?
is,
I'm glad it's with me.
yeah, me too. There's another coach in the Midwest, Brian McDermott.
Oh yeah, I know. He's been on your show a lot.
He's we did a 3-burger, you know, and actually the last podcast when we got to 225, we're like, did we cover everything here, or do we want to go a little further? So we made a decision to stop. But now we're good. Now we started up again. I like it. I wanted to ask you, as far as reading material for some of the younger coaches, like, what's a good volleyball book? Um, you can name one, you can name 2 that some of
Ari's
some of
book, you got to read Ari's, because
yeah.
you know what, Ari. Well, okay, everybody thought that Nike, was so far ahead with their swoosh, but it was really Reebok is the one that came out with thinking out of the box.
Right. Okay.
And the only reason I know that because I did a prepaid card program with Reebok. And I think thinking out of the box is still something that allows a person to be, I call it, more visionary than narrow-minded. If you become visionary. So the Power Volleyball book that Ari wrote really will open your eyes up to a lot of other things that maybe you never thought of. And see, to me, you have to be around, okay, like I was lucky to be around the Cuban coach, the Japanese coach, when Yamada was around, you know, Daihatsu, when they won the Olympics in 64, I was starting at that time. So, you know, I've had the chance to be around and in the training with all of those coaches.
Wow.
So do I believe everything that I saw? You know, it's like this. It's like posting. Normally I won't post because I posted one time and my friend from Canada said, Ruth, did you look to see all the thread that's with your post? I said, I'm not posting anymore.
No, posting. You got to post then ghost. Do not read the comment section.
Yeah,
If you're gonna post, I call it post then ghost. Maybe you feel like starting a little trouble. You'll just say something like midline passing is not as good as ankle passing. Fight me, and then just leave. Right? You might not even mean it. Just whatever.
No, you can do that, but you know what? This is what I feel. To me, someone asked me, Ruth, do you teach midline or outside your body? We called it lateral passing.
Right.
Call outside your body. Okay. If I'm training 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, the typical, let's say the 75% of the kids that need a different ball.
Right.
I want them to get their feet there.
Yes.
So my emphasis more on the feet than it is. But if I say you can play it outside your body, you're never going to move your feet.
Yeah. But that also comes with coaches who are knowing what they're doing, right? Like if I give you an example, and please kill that thought because it's only take 5 seconds. If you have a focused practice where the focus is one move to the ball, you're not going to be teaching midline because midline by definition requires more than one move, right? So I just wanted to interrupt by saying that, but go ahead.
Okay, so then let's say I've got some kids that I've trained for 4 years. They started with me at 4, now they're 8. Okay, they're good with their footwork and they can move and they can run and chew gum and they can do more than one thing. They can do double unders with jump roping. So I've gotten them to shuffle and jump rope, and I've gotten them to shuffle and double under with my arms crossed. So now they're pretty good. So now I can start saying, ball comes here. What do you think about playing it? Okay, this is what your arm should be. So I think there's, everybody says progressions is old school. I don't agree with that because however you want to say it, simple to difficult, that's a progression.
Got it.
And you can call it any educational, any way you want to put it. But by and large, if you're looking at teaching something like that, I think you've got to figure out that what do I need to do? It's like, remember the old saying is, some people can't even walk and chew gum.
Hey, that's hard. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, but
that'd be hard, Coach Nelson.
That's exactly okay. When I tell you to jump rope and I want you to stay on the line when you're jumping rope, you're 10 and under. I've got kids that have been in high school that can't even jump rope, and they come back, and now guess what? They feel better about themselves because they're more coordinated. They feel better about themselves because now I can move them all over the court, and I can call out a number, and I can and they can work on footwork and that. Because to me, everybody talks about performance training I can't push you hard unless you're in decent shape.
Yes.
Okay. The little ones, it's not a problem.
It's not because they'll beat you in a marathon. If you're in a track and field and they have to run 7 times with not even knowing that they're tired, they're gonna beat you. I have an 8-year-old.
If you've got those, so I have 2 or 3 8-year-olds. I never thought I could take them through 2 sessions, but they went 2 sessions, and someone says, "What is that like for you?" And I said, "Well, you got to remember, Kathy DeBoer always said to me, Ruth, you're 10 years ahead of your time." And I said, "You know what, Kathy? I know that." And I said, "You know what's more frustrating about it than anything else is trying to find people that really feel and think like I think, in the sense that can we not look ahead to see, I'm going to give this example. We're at Husker Stadium, 90,000 people, unbelievable event. It doesn't matter whether they were the first ones that did it or not, because there were some other people who did it before, but we didn't have social media then.
So who cares? Yeah.
That event should have been the thing that lit the torch so that it would be filtering down to everyone to really unite, get together. And okay, so hold that thought. Over here, women's basketball, CC lit the torch.
She
Basketball
really did.
coaches, they all have their things they don't like about each other. But when they come down to it and they want to win for their sport and they believe in their sport, they stick together. But you can't be in the hardest thing, and I'll say it's different now, but it still isn't different. Hardest thing in the early 70s, okay, was basketball never wanted you on their court, okay? And then when you went on their court, they didn't want you putting lines on their court. And the third thing is don't you dare put a hole in my floor because it's going to affect the bounce. I know it, Houston. I'll never forget that. Okay, so for me, I never looked at basketball as a challenge, meaning I never said, why don't I get what basketball gets? And now you've got it. Women's basketball has men's basketball, right? So they have that comparison. So in women's volleyball, the one advantage that I see is if everybody, USA Volleyball, JVA, AAU, Pro Volleyball Federation, Major League Volleyball, Athletes Unlimited, Love, everybody, if they truly care about the sport, what's the way that we could be on the same mission? There's got to be someone leading the mission. So when Kathy said that to me, I just said, you know what? You miss opportunities. Okay, the first missed opportunity was in 1984 when the women won the first medal ever, and it was silver. Well, guess what? They were predicted to win the gold, and they didn't, okay? But the men won the gold, okay? So the hype was on the men, okay? What's the next? We missed it. Next thing, gold medal for women. We missed it.
Yeah.
Why isn't that team going all over the country? Why aren't they on everything? It's you have to forget about yourself. And I'm saying this because when in my first job at University of Houston, going from George Williams small college to a large college, we weren't Division I at that time, but that was large and small college. My athletic director said to me, Ruth, you need to get engaged. And I said, what do you mean by that? I said, I don't want to be doing all that work at the committee level. She goes, you need to run and take the AIW National Championship chairperson position. And I said, I don't want to, all I care about is my team, my program. All I want to do is that and travel with the national team. That's all I cared about.
Okay.
Because I'm young.
Well, timing's everything too, right? I mean, you refused the position because they axed the other guy. So that's an example of timing, what you said previously.
Okay, so I take it. I learn from other people, but I learned one very important thing. You either have to be one of three: political, have someone that politics for you, or be oblivious to it. So now, for all those coaches that are out there, you need to get engaged and involved, and you need to be able to know what's going on, even if it's in a small circle. So if I'm in a state or a region, in order for me to have the okay to complain about something, it's like, don't complain unless you voted. If you didn't vote, quit complaining. So go and make a difference and figure out what that small little thing is. Now, some people will be more engaged, right? They'll do regional. They'll be with USA Volleyball Regional. They'll do JVA. They'll do AVCA, this and this. But you know what? The sport only grows if everybody starts doing more. And somebody said the other day, well, Ruth, could you do this? I said, no, I'm done.
No,
I have
that
my bucket
baton.
list.
I mean, you pass the baton. It's up to them to let the baton fall on the floor or grab it, right? But you've done your running. You ran your part of that, and it's there. You've done more than enough. You can't. And like the operative word in this long diatribe that you just gave, the operative words to me was if you care. All right. And I would never accuse anyone of not caring, but what I will accuse people of levels of caring. Does their ego, do they care about their ego identity more than the sport? There are people that, I live in the South Bay and everyone here loves the sport and cares about the sport, but I am telling you what's holding them up is it has to be them that gets to do it. And they all of a sudden their ego identity and where they fit into the sport and them calling the shots takes precedence over what's right. And it sickens me. And I was that guy. I moved here. I was oblivious to the politics because I'm taught by my stepfather and I'm taught by the United States Army. I mean, I'm a Gulf War vet. If you are what you say you are, keep focused this way. Don't look to the left and the right, and the good things will happen. And all of those good things happened to me in my first 3 years here until I hit the political wall and I had to pay attention to it because I got to this point where, and I don't want to sound like I'm an ego person, but I was moving too fast, so fast that I think it scared a dynamic of people where I was like, okay, wow, I get this far, I get to this door, and they're just like, nah, there's a good old boys club and you're not in it. But the best way to bring my point across is to tell you about Dana White. All right, Dana White is the UFC president, right? 1990, I guess 2000, he bought the UFC. They're 40 million in the red. All right. So he goes through all of these things. He takes a chance. He does the Ultimate Fighter, this reality show, and he finds the right group of guys in this. And then at the end, the two guys fight each other, and they're just fighting for their lives, right? And then all of a sudden, the ratings go up, and then the winner's supposed to get a contract. But it was such a great fight. The UFC decided both guys got contracts. They started crying, and like America felt the UFC. Now I want you to fast forward, and trust me, this is connected to what you're talking about. And this is the genius of us, right? We tell things and we bring it full circle. So Dana White's on a podcast. I think Lex Friedman, some Republican space ranger. And he says, I heard a story about you. He says, when you guys signed a contract with ESPN, you're done with Fox, it was $2.2 billion. And they said one of the stipulations is that Joe Rogan can't be part of the team. Joe Rogan can't commentate. That was one of the stipulations of the merger. And he says, they said when you found out, you called ESPN and said, tell them deal's off. The deal is off. And he didn't pick up his phone for 12 hours. Let them sweat. And they called back and they came, no, you can have your guy and this and that. And Dana had two reasons. One, there's a loyalty thing. He says, when we were in a red, this guy loved the sport so much, he agreed to do the first 5 shows for free.
Okay.
And he says, what would I be if I just said business over pleasure or business over whatever? What would I be if that guy who was with me the whole way when it was bad, I'm just going to let him go now that it's good, right? And here's the second most important thing. By the way, he's good. He's a guy that's never fought in the UFC, and he's the best color commentator and possibly in combat sports today. Right? Wow. There's another girl who never fought in the UFC. Her name is Laura Sanko. She's coming up, and a lot of people don't know her, but I think, my personal opinion, she's up there. So the moral of the story is Dana White wasn't just loyal to his person because his person helped make it. So my point is, keep the people that help you make it. Right? Don't keep enlisting the same people that are part of the problem, right? Like, I'm going to get in the politics, but like when the stock market crashed in 2008, like, do you hire the same 20 people to fix the stock market that crashed it, right? Maybe you have a decision to make, right? But it's the same guys. But the moral of the story is, one, he didn't abandon the guy who kept his promises on the way up, and two, from a business perspective, he knew it might have been bad for Disney because of what Rogan was going through with his podcast. Sure. And, the political, somehow this podcast with comedians turned into this, is now in the rankings of political shows. Is it a red? Is it a blue? I'm like, do you guys even listen to you guys are idiots. Do you actually listen to, I'm like, do you know like 29 of his last 30 guests were comedians? You're idiots. So, and that's where volleyball is taking a black eye. they have to take chances with people that make the sport work. And the reason why I brought myself in is because I built this certain brand and this following that people appreciated, that I think if there, let me just get, if there's someone like me that's doing what I'm doing that's better than me, I'm going to be out there and I'm going to say, why don't you have that guy in the Manhattan Beach Open on court one? Why Victoria Dennis? I'm now I'm going to name names. Why Victoria Dennis and Robert Sparrow, who, by the way, paid his dues indoor? Why the combination of those two? Why not someone that the fans want? the volleyball population has spoken. Right? And this is what you said that set off this alarm bell. And I hope I'm not making a straw man argument here. If they care, this whole double hit second thing, that was decided in a room of 40 people. And they said, we debated this topic rigorously. If you debated the topic, why were we the last to know about this topic and after the rule was implemented? Why are we the last to know, right? Someone had to leak that story and say they're talking about it. Do you know what I'm saying? So let's start enlisting and taking chances with people that are not in your comfort zone for the sake of the sport of volleyball, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, because right now, I mean, somebody asked me from one of the pro leagues, they said, Ruth, do you think that we need a Caitlin Clark and a Barbie, Bayou Barbie? And I said, absolutely. I said, I don't know if you need it to the same extent, but the by and large is you've got plenty of Caitlin Clarks and Barbies in volleyball.
Yeah.
But you just haven't really highlighted them. And people have to, I mean, and it's not all about ego.
No.
It's about the competitiveness of the sport. It's just like, why is it that the guys get to talk underneath the net and the women, they tell them to quit it? You know, you can't be, hey, we did that. I don't know if you know Kathy Gregory. Oh my God. I mean.
Oh, how about the whole Cuban national team? They all about shouting under the net.
But
that was that was like giving Popeye spinach, man. You don't want to talk smack to them.
But the point is it's all in. Okay, why did Special Olympics ever become so popular? Okay, human interest stories, because everybody really wants to get to know the sport. Okay, then you've got 5 different rules going on. I mean, it took me a while to figure out the scoring on Athletes Unlimited. And let's say I don't know anything about volleyball and I'm going to watch something. All right, so, but my point to you is Special Olympics did these human interest stories. Of course, they had the Kennedy name behind the organization. But remember, I mean, I started with that in 81 and we had no international teams. And by the World Games, we had 11 international teams. And by 95, when I was going into the marketing side, we had over 110, international volleyball teams, even the Cuban team. Now, the Cuban team was not like your average USA team because we had divisions in Special Olympics. They brought the best of the best. We brought the best of a different division. So, man, they were like, they could play in college.
It's night and day, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, three gold medals, right? It's probably the best, from a male or female indoor volleyball perspective, probably the best team ever assembled. Marella Luis, right? Carvajales.
But I was talking about Special Olympics.
Oh, sorry. You were talking about something.
Yeah. I was talking about Special Olympics.
Nice. Yeah, no, for sure.
Because that's why they became popular, because of these human interest stories. So I believe that, everybody's, okay, I personally wouldn't want to be a D1 coach right now. However,
no, because it has nothing to do with coaching. That's why.
For a D1 coach.
Because it has nothing to do with coaching. That's why.
That's it. And all the things that are on, you really have to figure out, how do they even know what it's going to be like next week? So everything then gears down to, okay, where's the emphasis should be placed? Well, it's being placed on juniors. Well, whatever the kids do in their juniors, they do the same thing when they get to college. I mean, listen, when one of the players, and I won't say the player, the Cowboys was complaining about this, he bypassed the coach, went right to Jerry Jones. Now, what do you think players do in college? They bypass the coach and go to the president of the university, or whether the parents do it. So the system, and you know this, just it seems like everything's happening in our country. I always say this starts from the top down. You know, it's like, why is there not enough emphasis on the women 64 and 68 Olympic teams after the 60th anniversary? Why is there not an emphasis on history? Because it has to start from the top down. Somebody has to care.
And if it has to start from the top down, then you have to examine the top, don't you?
Well, you got to find somebody that needs.
But by your own admission, if you're saying that it starts from the top down, shouldn't we be looking at the top? Who's up? Who's at the top, and what are they doing? And this is a difficult conversation because a lot of people don't want to do that because they still have a volleyball career they want to cling to. But and I certainly have aspirations to do more things with beach and indoor or whatever, where I think me talking about this and me criticizing them too harshly might not go against my best interest. But at the same time,
but we can make that statement.
I mean, no, I'm not. Look, I ain't backing down. I'm saying what I'm gonna say because that's what made the podcast what it is. You know, I'll just say this to the camera. I'm not this way because I'm on camera. I'm on camera because I'm this way.
Right.
You know, so then that and to me, I don't do, but I don't do that with a motivation to advance, right? Because to me, some people have their mind made up. If I'm not gonna do Manhattan Beach, I was never gonna be their guy, right? So I'm not gonna walk on eggshells, you know. And also, you and I both have a professional sample of which hat we wear when we're working compared to which hat we wear when we're talking, right? Going back to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan doesn't call a UFC match the same way he's talking to Joey Diaz. or whatever raunchy comedian, right? Or like Bill Burr. He ain't gonna tease the conversation he has with Bill Burr is not the same way he's gonna call a UFC match. And I think for me, I've always used this as my safe space. I'm like, you're not gonna judge my commentating by this, huh?
So John Sparrow, you know, so he's now
he's a mensch.
His experience,
I like him. Mm-hmm.
With his experience, what he's done in the fundraising side, what he's done he's coming in with a little different background than the majority of all the CEOs that were before. Whereas before, you know, you've got somebody who had money. You had someone who was just strictly volleyball. And I'm a person that believes this. You can learn something in every situation. And I think that, you know, he has a daughter that's 9 years old. So it changes. Hey, what are we doing at that level? You know, which maybe wasn't something that was done before. I think there was efforts done before, but now the men's in college has started to expand. You know, however the rules are going to change, you know, it's going to change things. We don't know. It's not going to even be the same in 5 years, you know?
Yeah.
But I do believe he's a visionary.
He is, and he brings administrative experience as well as playing experience, as well as coaching experience, as well as international experience at every level. Like, if you're going to hire someone to be the CEO, because there's no prior experience. It's like running for president. It's like, what's your prior experience? Oh, I was president already, right? There's unless you're Taft or Agent Orange, right? You're not going to have that prior experience. But as far as relative experience that leads you to this position, is there anyone more deserving and not just deserving, paying his dues? Is there anyone better? Right? Because I'm a cold fish. I don't care if you're deserving. Are you the best person for this job? And in his case, the answer to both of those questions is yes.
Yeah. But so you've got somebody there that can make visionary decisions. Mm-hmm. Now the question would be is, will those other identities or affiliate organizations support in the way that everybody feels they can win?
And if they don't, fire them. You gotta, sometimes you gotta get rid of some people and sometimes you gotta get rid of everybody. Now, I'm not saying John Sparrow, clean house, get the broom, mop, squeegee, sponge, dishwashing liquid, detergent. I'm not saying do that. I'm just saying if, I don't want, again, I'm a volleyball guy, but I'm from the Bill Parcells school. Either you can do the job or you cannot. Do we have what we need here to win a Super Bowl? Yes or no? The one season was at the Cowboys. He benched the Bledsoe for Romo, right? No one knew who the heck Tony Romo was. That's what you call, you need to be a little bit of a cold fish, unless you're Spara, because Spara finds a way to keep it lukewarm and still get the job done. I think that's that guy. That guy's not throwing around the word genius, but that's his genius. He does it with honey. He attracts the bears with honey. I call
it his superpower, like Simone Biles uses.
Yep. We had a conversation off the podcast about my critique about some of the wrong moves I thought he did in this 2016 Olympics. But one, as coaches and commentators, we have to call what we see with our own two eyes. And two, John can take it. I could see him in a tournament and he can take it. He's not a thin-skinned dude, and most important.
Well, you know what though? Let's talk about different groups that are on Facebook.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for me is when I will read, and I do spend time on.
We're sitting here talking about people's jobs now. Sorry.
Okay, so here we go. What happens? Why is it that people seem to want to always tell and say and state and they basically post such bad things? Not even, okay, we're talking about what's best for the sport. I'm playing at a D1 and I just is in the Final Four. And when you interview me, don't talk bad about the 3 schools you've been at. Why can't you talk about the sport and what the sport has given you? It's no different than you take chemistry 1, 2, and 3. You have 3 different professors. You like one of them you wish you weren't in. The other one you said, I don't like the delivery, but the information's great. Okay, you lived through it. Why is it that we can't be interviewed and talk about the positive things? Because
positive is measured in volume, though, right? Look, let's say I work a 9 to 5, right? And let's say you're the office manager. Am I late every day? Or am I late? Like, am I on time pretty much most of whatever? And then one day it's like, anyone see Jason? 6 minutes later, I walk in. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry, right? Are you that person that's going to be like, oh my God, yeah, you know what? That's the same thing as stealing. What are you doing, right? Or do you give me a one-off because I'm always on time, right? But how many people are late every day and no one says anything? And when they do, it's like, oh my God, you're calling them out. So to me, you measure the criticism in mass and volume. And 2, is that just a troll? And I don't care about their credentials, right? They could have no position and be right, know? So to me, it just has to make sense. It just, and when they get personal and when they talk at you and not talk to you, that's just what we call a skip. Do not, for sure. This is where I'm older. This is where I'm older than you. Do not feed the animals at the zoo. Do not feed trolls. Like when someone's talking at you and not to you, skip it. When someone attacks your character instead of the argument, skip it. When someone makes an argument so ridiculous that they narrow it down to only 2 choices when they know damn well that your argument goes beyond that false dichotomy, maybe stay with them, but maybe recognize a troll that's trying to suck you in and skip it. So that's the best way to approach it. And that's, to me, as you get older, and I won't say older because the guy's 20 years younger than me that understand the internet, that taught me to not feed the animals at the zoo.
Okay, so that's why I started Ruthopedia.
Yes, come on, get out of here. I'm going to tell you my favorite book in a minute, but tell me about Ruthopedia.
Ruthopedia.com.
Let's go.
I started it about 3 months ago. And the reason why is because I wanted people to see through my lens what I think. It had nothing to do with what's your opinion, what's someone else's opinion. I'm just telling you because it got to a point where there's certain things that I believe and I want to be able to put them down. So a friend of mine, who's your friend now, Pam Brandt, when she did her, she did the one show, and she did the magazine on Flow. Yeah. And she said, who's Flow? And one of the things about it is she says, Ruth, do you realize when I pulled up your name on Google, okay, this is before ChatGPT, before Google, And she said, do you know how many things came up? But I said, I have no idea. So I decided to do ruthopedia.com, and the background behind it is Pam is the reason why I started it.
Let's go.
Yeah, because she did that. But let me tell you, now it's like everybody uses, I started using ChatGPT, before, I think it was like right around COVID. And what I do is I'm in the car, okay? And I'll go, who is the #1 worldwide kids influencer for teaching kids 10 and under? And then they'll list me and they'll list somebody else. And then they'll say, and I said, well, what about Ruth Nelson? And they go, well, we don't have any information. I said, you don't have that she coached in college? They go, well, no, we don't. And I said, well, did she not coach at Houston and LSU and this? Oh, we're sorry for our mistake. We now will, yes, she did coach at Houston from this year and this year. So now I've learned that you can ask again and they will go look more and then come back.
Good. Well, the best coaches out there are Google Ghost, right? Mario Trebich, right? You know him. How many Olympics has that guy been in? How many? It was like 3 silvers and a gold. Try looking him up, right? Wagner, the coach Wagner for the German beach team that Brink and Reckerman won in 2012. Volkenhorst and Ludwig won in 2016. So there's 2 Olympics, 1 gold medal per gender. Look him up, see what happens. This is where, like you said, volleyball needs to take care of our own. Lucky for me, my last name's Debelius. I can't hide.
Yeah, no, that's
yeah.
exactly.
Google isn't my friend, but Chat GPT is. They said some things about me, and I was like, wow. I started calling out my own name. I was like, this is Jason. This is Jason.
Hey, but have you used Grok 3?
No.
Elon Musk. Oh, I use that too.
Yeah.
You need to try using that too, because it's always interesting, because I'm looking at, okay, how do you incorporate AI into any of the things that I might be doing based on 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so it was like during, right before COVID, one of my players was talking about ChatGPT, and she was in the school district in Garland. And she says the school basically blocks, if someone turns something in from ChatGPT, because you use the school server and stuff. And I said, what do you mean ChatGPT? She goes, okay, I'll teach it to you. And so she talked to me like in 10 or 15 minutes. Well, it was like after COVID, and she's now at Emory, and her mom is shagging balls because her other sister, younger sister's training with me. And so we're doing it by Zoom during COVID. So I'm at home, they're on the court, they got an iPad, they got an iPhone, the parent, the tosser, and the kid all have earpods in, and I'm at home talking to all of them. Okay, toss the ball higher, reach high, I'm talking to all of them because we got 3 going on. And the mom we get done and we gets off, and I told her, I says, okay, now what do you think about this? And she goes, oh, Ruth, she says, I do all this kind of stuff at work and it's so tedious. And I said, okay, tell me right now, give me some things that you would write an email to. And she gave me some things and I typed it up in that. And then I sent it to her. And she goes, where'd you get that? And I said, that's ChatGPT. She goes, what is that? She goes, where did you learn that? I said, your daughter taught me. And the mom's a lawyer.
That's hilarious, dude. Hey, I'd like to do a little rinse and repair on 2 minute names I mentioned.
Okay.
Victoria Dennis, Rob Sparrow. I was trying to say that together, the combination of them together, I do not like. I wasn't trying to say as individuals, they're not whatever. Victoria Dennis has been out for a while.
Yeah.
And Rob Sparrow's been at it for a while. The Irvine Games as an announcer that built his brand to be able to commentate. So my issue wasn't with them as much as it was the combination of them. Like Kevin Barnett, who's like an indoor god, having him on the beach and Cameron Irwin together is just, it's too difficult. And I actually told him, I'm the type of guy that says to their face, like, hey, I wasn't a big fan of your work, but better that you hear it from me now. So you don't think I'm talking to you now and talking about you later, but, because that's just business. That's not personal, but I just wanted to rinse and repair. I think, and my bias goes more towards Rob, very capable commentators, just not a big fan of them on the same booth together. And you know what? The trolls, because I don't respond, but it doesn't mean I don't always read. Manhattan Beach in Chicago. I was in London for Manhattan Beach, and everybody was like, "Dude, do you see what's going on?" I'm like, no. Do you see what they're saying on, Twitter or whatever? I'm like, oh, Twitter's not even a real place. What are you talking about? What they're saying on Twitter, right? But
Hey, but you know what? I
man,
hope
did
that
they rake them through the coals?
I
Hmm?
know. I hope that they figure a way to keep people that still love the game.
Yeah,
I'm not talking specifically about me. I'm thinking like what John Cook, what Russ Rose. They
yeah.
didn't go through all of those situations with the change of the kids, the change of the scoring, without having some thought that they can share or even mentor, even if it's just a one-time deal. Because, to me, I consider myself, I can be very focused or I can be visionary, and I'm more of innovative than I am, okay, I'll do it. It's like Kathy DeBoer asked me one time, she goes, this is during COVID. She goes, Ruth, how are you doing with, not being able to train on the court? I said, Kathy, I've been doing Skype training for 10 years. So this isn't new to me. She says, okay, I just figured you had to be doing, but she says, my question is, how about the difference in the kids? And I said, Kathy, this is best because I get bored easy. I said, this is exactly what I like. The kids that like to do many types of things without doing the same thing in a row. I never like to do things
And
the
I'm
same in
sad
a row.
because we don't have anyone like that for a beach out here, right? Like, I know people think I'm hurting their feelings because I omit them and I don't mention their names. Like, look, I'm not talking about like me saying John's a genius and everybody else is saying, oh, what about me? What about me? Right? I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about, I guess it's a testament to your uniqueness
Mhm.
that we don't have anyone on the beach, but I guess in their defense, we don't have another Ruth Nelson for indoor either. so, I think I might
Well, maybe
I think
because
I
they're
might
all
be
dead.
well,
They're all
yeah,
gone.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah. Well, you drank the vampire juice. That's what happened. You know what happens? I know your stick. You hang around this town for like 20 years, right? And then when 20 years go by, people realize you're not getting old. You have to move because they know you're a vampire. You probably move town to town, and when people realize that everyone else is getting old and you still look like that, you
And they
know,
wonder,
and
hey,
I ain't trying to
listen,
bust you out on the internet and tell everybody a secret, but I think I'm on to you.
hey, listen, when they had the hurricane and the also
Mm,
Katrina,
yeah.
I went down and I ended up helping Rose at Martin Methodist, okay, because I
Okay.
had some time. And I went to some of her, because I was there during the season, and I went to some of her travel tournaments. And okay, just picture this. We're at Houston. I'm driving a van. Rose is over there keeping me awake. Rose Majors, who was a silver medalist, right?
Right.
And people forgot about her because she played 9 years in Japan, but I consider her one of the best trainers in the country. But she's over there and she's co-piloting, okay? I'm in Alabama now at Martin Methodist, which is right out Pulaski, and Tennessee, and we're driving, and I'm driving again. And I said, what's with this picture? You're the head coach. I'm assisting you. I was the head coach at Houston, and I'm still driving. And she goes, no, it's just that it's much easier for you to drive and me to talk or some. And this, okay, so now wait, we're at a game. And she comes over and she's cracking up. If you've never had her on, you need to have her on because she's hilarious. Okay. A lot of people don't know it, but she was voted the most improved blocker at the Olympics in 84. And people don't know that. But
Hmm.
she also she played right side, played left side, played all the way around. But anyhow, she comes from the referee after coin toss and she's laughing and just loud. I go, what's wrong? She says, that guy up there said, that looks like Ruth Nelson on the bench. And she goes, oh no, that can't be Ruth Nelson.
That
And
woman
I
looks
said,
way too young.
no, I don't know about that.
I'll tell the story for you then in that regard, but go ahead. Yeah.
So the point was is
Mm.
I just think there are people that just really enjoy the sport. And I enjoy the sport because I see there's so much more to give to the sport. And I think that a lot of coaches don't like that because, and it's okay if you don't want to do that. It's like being a medical doctor, right? If you become a medical doctor, you probably don't have a lot of time besides being a medical doctor. If you go up the ranks and you're on the research and you're doing all this, you don't have time. But I do it because it's fun. And the kids, keep you young, enthusiastic, and they stimulate your mind. Because I can tell you, I came away from Montana going, holy cow, Montana, Nebraska, they are crazy about BYOP. They're crazy about Go Kids. They're receptive about everything. And I'm thinking, how come people in Dallas all of a sudden, I mean, maybe they think I'm too old and I don't know anything. You know, maybe they think I'm senile. Maybe they think, who knows what they think. But I'm the type of person I'm easy to get along with. And I have opinions, but I'm not opinionated. How's that?
You're always going to be one step better than me on that one. I guess I was built for this game, man. I got something to say about everything, Ruth. So, the first book I ever read for volleyball, because I'm a kid from Brooklyn, and they're not teaching it, right? And all of the teams, all of the players are from the Caribbean, and this and that don't have the patience to teach some lefty who's like 40 pounds overweight with an attitude. So I bought a book called American Volleyball Coaches Association Handbook. It was written by three guys, but Doug Beal was one of the first names on there. And I bought the book and coached myself. So if it's out there, someone wants to know about the game, just read the book cover to cover. And then it's the technical part, it's the logistical part. I have fingerprints on the ceiling from my house, learning the 4-step approach. I had the plastic ball I'm bumping to myself, teaching myself how to hold in the snow, you know, New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, right? And then 3 years later, I'm playing overseas. So, you know, but to my credit, that was I'm long armed, I'm barrel body, but I had like I'm 6'1", but I have a 6'8" wingspan. So
Okay.
I already had like that natural whatever. But that book, and no one wanted to teach me. And then one winter later, spring and summer, everybody was like, wow, do you ever think of Junior Olympics? You ever think? I'm just like, yeah. And that's, yeah. So I recommend if they still sell it. And just for fun, there's a book that came out in 1992 called Volleyball Rules in Pictures. And Volleyball Rules in Pictures has the rule and shows a picture of what it looks like. For example, you'll appreciate this. I'm at the Hermosa Beach Open. I'm filming, I'm helping them out. I'm just filming one court for free. You know, they're not appreciative of me, but I did it anyway. So I get into this discussion, and there's all these old schoolers around me, and they're like, yeah, well, that's illegal. And I'm like, and we're talking about rules that everyone thinks that are illegal that are actually legal. So I said, first, on the beach, passing with your hands is not illegal. It's only illegal to double it, right? Now, if you're in a league like CBVA where they wrote into their rule book, no, if you do that, we don't care if it's clean, we're calling it. That's their league, their rules, right?
Right, yeah, gotcha.
And I told him another rule is this: hands apart is not illegal. And this guy just, you don't know what you're talking about. This and that. He's yelling at the top of his lungs. And I'm like, look, I'm not saying I wrote the rule, and I'm not prepared to argue. And I'm calm, right? But I guess some old schools around me, it got so bad that he's yelling at me. And I got 5 people telling me to shut up, not him, right? And it was a really rough weekend. I felt really unappreciated. So what I said was, you'll appreciate this. Oh, just shut up. And I said, hold on a second. How about you shut up? You know, and I said, you'll love this line. I said, you're not going to take your shots at me and I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. Okay. That's in the Bible and I ain't in there. I'm going to put it on you, you know? And then everyone just got quiet. And everybody's like, let's give the crazy guy with the Yankee hat his space, right?
Oh, yeah, his space.
But I had this choice. I could just take it, let him yell at me, or I could just be the guy that doesn't know karate, but he knows crazy, right? So I made the arbitrary choice to be crazy Jason, because it was a moment of weakness and I didn't feel like being disrespected. And that's the humorous part to that. But this, guys, is not illegal. The hands are not open. It's never been illegal. 5 minutes later, a referee comes over and I'm like, I have a question for you because I know they're all listening to me. Is this illegal? And she's like, no. One of the actual refs, right? Had a podcast, 2 weeks, had 2 refs on, right? To answer live questions. And that was one of the questions. Not illegal. What do you know, and the reason why I recommend Volleyball Rules in Pictures. Ball hits the part of your body here and here. By the rules, it's one motion.
Right.
under the new rules and the old. They're like, but it has to be hard driven. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It does in terms of fingertip contact. And this is, if anyone is stuck for all 3 hours, because we're on 3 hours now, that's a great way for everybody to say, hey, start. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. That means that was his way of saying you should be listening more than you should be talking.
Okay, so during COVID, Danielle Scott calls me and she says, Ruth, my daughter is playing soccer and the coach is not going to be there. He's going to be sick and I've got to take over the practice. Could you give me some soccer drills and stuff we can do? And I said, you're calling me because you know that I did clinics with Pele because he was with Dr. Pepper. There was 5 of us that used to do clinics together. And I said, you know what you should do? It's called Google. And she just laughed. Okay. So in my mind, I said, I'm going to Google what she's talking about, passing drills and everything for soccer. It took me to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 places. And I said, okay, guess what, folks? I'm focusing into elementary school. I'm going to start and put everything on RNN Sports Gym. I'm going to gear it just like kids. Ready, set, go.
Okay.
I have a membership. Ready is free because physical education teachers don't want to pay more. And it's based on a Google Classroom. Just because of that, what Danielle said, I checked it in one of my parents who was doing some filming for me said, have you ever thought about doing a Google Classroom study? And I said, no, I don't know anything about Google Classroom. And so I developed that. And if you're 12 and under and you're coaching, you can go on there and become a member. And it gives you a guided tour by an 8-year-old. And she takes you around and takes you can do courses, you can certification, you can see videos, you can see skills, you can see drills. And it takes you, and it's all the emojis, Jason, I did myself. There's over 400 on there.
Wow. That's cool, dude.
You need to go on that sometime. RNN
I
Sports
think I
Gym.
would, man. I think I would. So we're not going to do a lightning round, but I do want to ask some of these curious questions as we depart depart this place, but never our presence, right?
Right, absolutely.
Do you have a favorite comedian? Do you listen to comedy? I'm a Chappelle guy. I mean, I like
Billy
him a lot.
Crystal and Whoopi, when they were at don't you remember the Academy Awards?
Yes. Oh, I remember when he was going around a room and he was like captioning people.
Yes.
This, when he was like, I see white people, like the guy from Green Mile, and then the James Bond agent. This thong is killing me. It's just like it was like he was hilarious.
Now, outside of new ones,
I like George Carlin. He passed away, but his comedy survives forever. Yeah, that's where I got the quote. There's a good old boys club in United in it. I got that. He was speaking in terms of Politico, but and he was trying to emphasize up down is weaponized to make left and right. Up and down weaponizes left and right, and that was what he was trying to say.
Okay, all right.
They're up, like people up there. They have solidarity, right? They don't want poor people to have solidarity. You're not going to see lack of solidarity from the wealthy. Okay, all right. So up down is enjoying us play left and right, and I really loved him for that. Last good movie you watched at home or in a movie theater? Was this something you saw at home last couple of days that you're like, this is pretty cool, or do you not have the bandwidth for that?
Oh no, I like Landman.
Landman. Okay.
Because that's Texas, man. That's just exactly what goes on.
Yeah.
Big time.
I was watching Die Hard with a Vengeance this morning.
But hey, when I was in Montana, it made me feel like it was at Yellowstone.
Okay. Yeah, Yellowstone.
I watched all of that.
Yeah.
I watched everything.
So, all right. So as we depart, maybe give some people your Insta handle or just your website where they want to know more
of what you're about. Gym.
Say it again.
RNN Sports Gym.
Well, that's it.
R like Ruth, N Sports Gym.
There it is.
And it's if you put .com, you're on my website. If you just do that, you've got my X account, you've got my Instagram account, you got my Facebook, but don't hold me to it because I hate to admit it. I have 5 Facebook accounts, 24 Facebook pages,
Yep.
6 Instagram accounts, and 12 X accounts.
There you go. Let's make sure they try to hack them one at a time, right? So,
Yeah, that's exactly.
yeah, like, no, like when they hack your account, nobody cares. But if you say COVID didn't come from a bat dog, they're on you in like 6 hours. So, right? They don't protect your account. They just cancel it. But guys, hey, listen, Ruth Nelson might love you guys, but I don't love any of you guys. In fact, I can't stand any of you guys. In fact, I'm out of here. So for all of you at home, for all of you on your iPads, for all of you on your Droid, if that still exists, for all of you on your desktop who runs the world, you're looking at us. Old school, baby, old school. That is Ruth Nelson. I am Jason DeBellis, and we're going to hit my music. This is episode 233 of the Option Podcast. Stay with me as I hit my music, and we are out of here. Come check out the Option Podcast on optionvb.com. It's also available on iTunes and Spotify and on YouTube under the NY Varsity Sports handle. You're going to love what you hear.